She's muting me out.
There you go, unmuted.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Berlin Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Today is October 12th, 2023. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. I'm going to ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Okay, thank you, everyone. And Maureen, can I ask you to do the roll call? Is everyone online who's joining us, zooming in, muted? Okay, because we're getting some feedback here. All right, terrific. And all right, so
Maybe it's mine, this seems
I was
loose.
gonna say, I think it's us.
is it us?
It
Yeah, I
keeps
think-
showing it's us on the screen.
Somebody's might be a little loose or something. So. June Daly. Here. Angelou Millard. Here. Dan Jorsey.
Here.
Timothy Zigmont.
I don't know where Tim is. I did not hear from him. He may be traveling, so I don't know if we should excuse him at this point. See if he joins in later.
Okay. Brian Rogan.
Here.
Chairman Veely,
Here,
Scott Hamel.
Here.
John Dyken
Here.
and Steve Biella Jr.
Here.
You. So you have a quorum with one regular member missing and both alternates are present.
okay, at this point, I'll ask Mr. Dyken to be seated or have take Tim Zigmont's spot on the commission, please.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Before we begin, I just want all my commissioners to be aware as we have minutes and stuff like that, that recording secretaries have to review. I want to make sure that everyone speaks clearly into the microphone when you have any comment or thoughts or questions. So that this way, everyone in the audience can hear, everyone online can hear, and our recording secretary, when transcribing the minutes, can hear as well, okay? All right, so I just want to bring that to point. So the first item on the agenda is GS 824 Municipal Improvement Referral. This is an easement for trails at the rear of Farmington Avenue, the south side east of the Ray Road. And what do we have on this, Maureen?
So you do, that was distributed in your packet. We distributed the, actually the town council item because I find that those are well-written and there's no sense in rewriting what staff has already written for a different board. So, and Jim Mahoney's online and I think probably describe it best.
Okay, Mr.
Just realized I didn't turn on the TV behind you for the audience, so
Oh, okay.
you can see him, the audience.
No, I can't see. Okay, I'm back. So, all right, so Mr. Mahoney, we're going to be referring to the 824 referral to planning and zoning. Is there anything that you want to add into the comments that we have?
Just briefly, the planning commission was involved in kind of creating this potential for trails behind 848 Farmington Avenue when you did the site plan review with CIL and, you know, created an easement along the back of the parking lot, et cetera. And, you know, at that time, the land trust acquired the parcel in the back as open space at 1.3 acres. There was a lot line revision with the fire department. And recently we've gotten a grant to do a few things that we've talked about before, including additional units on 848, including 5 affordable units, plus the trails here and work at 362 Main Street for the Transition Academy. This piece is the trails. So in order to create the trails, we need easements from the 3 property owners involved. That's Newport, Kensington Fire Department, and the Berlin Land Trust. I've been in communication with all of them. I think they're supportive and we'd like to be able to enter into those easements. So we would like the support of the Planning and Zoning Commission for this activity.
Okay. So is this specifically for just the easement for the trails then? It's not
Yes.
attached to any specific site plan or anything?
No, it's just authorizing the town manager to enter into easements with the three property owners to create the trails.
Okay, all right, terrific. Questions, commission?
I have one thing to add.
Yes,
So we did bring this up to the Conservation Commission at their meeting Tuesday night. Fortunately, I didn't grab those notes, but one of the recommendations is that they would encourage the area be signed with the conservation area signs that are typical. And it also be recommended that dog cleanup signs be put as well, particularly with residents in adjacent
okay.
properties.
So conservation easement markers and
Dog cleanup signs.
poop collectors or whatever. I don't know what you want to call those things. All right, commission comments, questions, concerns?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of securing of easements from Newport Realty Group, the Kensington Fire Department, and the Berlin Land Trust to allow trail improvements to be constructed and to provide public access to the trails at the rear of 848 Farmington Avenue, with the stipulation that conservation markers and dog cleanup signs be placed appropriately.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jorsey. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Rogan. Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? So moved. All
Thank you.
righty. You're welcome. Thank you. Commission business, we're going to schedule some public hearings.
So in your supplemental packet, I put the applications for each of those under the have a sign in front of them that says schedule.
Yeah,
So that's just for each of these. The second item where it's pending additional information to come in. They didn't actually apply for the special permit and they applied for their site plan. So I think that should just be held off for now.
okay,
Whole dog copy, with the understanding that, or rather, with the request that you allow staff to schedule it if we get everything in order.
okay.
for Use of an existing site.
All right, and okay, all right, we want to go point by point on these. Okay, so special permit use application of Joseph Casio at 586 Deming Road for a special permit use for an indoor golf training facility. We have a suggested date of November 2nd. Commission, what's the pleasure?
I would be happy to make a motion for November 2nd, but wondering if the commission's pleasure is to postpone to the following meeting. I don't know what our agenda is looking like.
Yeah, that was my concern when I saw all these applications.
So.
What's the next meeting? I do not have my phone.
If I can respond in part to that.
Yes,
Some of these applications have been delayed since their original submittal to the town due to other issues they may have had. This one, for instance, just went through wetlands. So it had been put on hold. You may recall in the spring, you denied it without prejudice or rejected accepting the application. Actually, I think the motion, I don't exactly recall, but I believe it was not accepted the application because they didn't simultaneously submit with the wetlands, which is required by statute. Now they have been through the wetlands process. So their original submission actually came in last December. So I would
So
encourage
we're
it
under
to be,
time constraint.
yeah, that one has a time constraint for the others.
Okay,
All
I'll
right.
make a motion to schedule a public hearing on this item for November 2nd.
okay, we have a motion by Ms. Jorsey. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Rogan. Further discussion, questions? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed, so moved. Just make sure they know it might be a wild and woolly November 2nd meeting.
As we see the agenda come together, your pleasure, I'll have conversations with the applicants as to where they are on the agenda and what else. is on
Yeah,
their Agendas as well.
okay. All right, terrific. And then the second one, we're just going to skip over, or do we need a motion? As our planner has suggested.
I'll make a motion to allow staff to schedule a public hearing as appropriate once all of the application documentation has been received.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Jorsy. Do we have a second? Who? Scott Hamel. Okay, thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So moved. Subdivision application of Eric Kucharzik for an additional lot at 65 Savage Hill Road, MBL 17-3-143-1A. And this is also going up or suggested for November 2nd as well. Is this just a subdivision? Is it just?
One lot, the 2 lot subdivision, they have a lot that they got from by a free split, and this is for an additional lot on the property. And they had been postponed to going further through getting on your schedule to be scheduled due to that, the discussion you had on Building Square. And working with that Building Square regulation and the interpretation you made at your last meeting, I told them they could go forward with your application.
Okay, Right.
I'll make a motion to schedule that public hearing for November 2nd.
okay, Ms. Jorsy has the motion. Second, yes, by Mr. Dyken. Further discussion, all those in favor? Aye, those opposed, so moved. Then subdivision application of Michael Honeyman for 11 lots at MBL 8-3-52-1 on the east side of High Road and Glen Street. Suggested date again is going to be November 2nd. Now, this is for 11 lots. Is,
It's 11 lots, and you do have until November 25th to open that public hearing, so there would be one more meeting date.
okay, so let me ask, our November meetings are the 2nd and the 20, right before Thanksgiving? Or wait,
The 16th. The 2nd is the first Tuesday, and the 16th is the third Tuesday. Thanksgiving is the 4th Tuesday.
Yeah.
which is, Thursday. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Thursdays. We're on
yeah,
Thursday.
oh, no, I know, all Thursday.
The 23rd is Thanksgiving.
All right,
This year is the 4th.
and there's no way,
Thursdays is the month.
and there's no way we could take this guy and move him off to the 16th instead of putting him on the 2nd. I'm just trying to
Yeah,
give
you
the,
have until the 25th of November to schedule,
to schedule
to
him.
to open the public hearing.
Okay, all right.
I'll make a motion to schedule this item to November 16th for public hearing.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Jorsy, a second by Ms. Miller. And further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, so moved. All right, I'm trying to give us a little bit of breathing room here. All right, into the public hearings we go. Application of 1906 Berlin LLC, prepared by Christopher J. Smith Esquire, Alter and Pearson LLC, submitted pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 8-30G. This is the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals. And we have is the application for site plan approval to permit a 52-unit multifamily residential community known as Spruce Brook Apartments on real properties known as 1906 Berlin Turnpike and 1934 Berlin Turnpike. Do I need to read all those map numbers into public hearing? I should, okay. 1906 would be map 21-2, block 115, lot 7. 1934 Berlin Turnpike is map 21-2, block 115, lot 8. And 0 Berlin Turnpike, map 21-2, block 115, lot 8A. Okay, so this is going to be 1906. I need to get my stuff out. This is a big pile over here. Okay. All right. Okay, anyone want to start at this point? We are in the public hearing.
Madam Chairwoman,
Yes,
Good evening,
sorry.
Madam Chairwoman. Oh, sorry,
Oh,
go ahead. I'm
okay.
sorry.
I'm sorry, I just couldn't see, I couldn't see your name there, so I'm looking going, huh, who's this? What?
All right, my apologies. My apologies.
That's all
Is it
right.
there now? Okay, it's showing up on my screen. I apologize, Madam Chairwoman.
Yeah, no problem.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman, members of the commission, professional staff, town attorney. For the record, my name is Chris Smith. I'm a land use attorney with the law firm of Alter and Pearson, and I appear before you this evening on behalf of 1906 Berlin LLC. At the outset, I do apologize for not being able to be there in person, but I am away on vacation, but I'm taking time out to be here for as long as I can, and then I'm going to have to leave at a certain point. Meg Hope from our office, who's a land use attorney from Alter and Pearson, will be taking my place if we don't finish before I have to leave for a plane. But I believe with us this evening, we have on behalf of 1906 Berlin LLC, Mr. Patrick Snow, again, Meg Hope, a land use attorney with the law firm of Alter and Pearson LLC. If not there already, Dan Ville of Zubik, our professional engineer, should be arriving shortly. I believe that we do have a representative from F.A. Hescott and Associates. Scott Hescott cannot be with us this evening due to a longstanding commitment as well. But I believe we have a representative from his office that is there this evening, Mr. Mohammed. And also joining us, I can see by remote is Mr. Brian Miller, our professional planning consultant, AICP certified planner. I believe, Madam Chairwoman, I know that some material came in as we're all aware, the text amendment, the public hearing concerning the text amendment has been closed. This matter concerns the site development plan or the site plan application, as you indicated when reading the agenda. I do believe that we did receive final comments from Mr. Hanfield, and there were some follow-up comments from, I believe it was your assistant building inspector. We did receive a letter. I just received a copy of it, and only because it was just prepared. Mr. Anthony Zemba, who is a certified ecologist and soil scientist with Landtech. Their offices are down in Westport, Connecticut. That letter is dated October 12th. And I only had an opportunity to review it just before getting on this call. And I do believe that Mr. Zemba, it's his opinion that there are no wetlands and watercourses on the property, nor is there any watercourse consistent with Mr. Cole's report that we had submitted into the record, I believe, at the first night of public hearing. Mr. Hanfield, Madam Chairwoman, members of the commission did have in his recent letter a number of suggested conditions to which we have no objection. One concerns that appropriate easements concerning the retaining wall be provided to the commission prior to obtaining a building permit, and my client has no objection to that. The assistant building inspector, I believe it's the assistant, I apologize if it's not, and it was the building inspector, did have some comments concerning the final detailed construction designs, and I would like to note to the commission that those always have to be prepared and submitted prior to receiving a building permit, and we certainly will be doing that. If there's any concern with the commission relative to a bedroom in the basement, within the units that have basements, you can certainly make it a condition of approval that they not be converted into basements. But again, the final, as with any zoning application, the final detailed construction plans and drawings are usually submitted or always submitted at the time of the application for the building permit. I'd like to remind the commission that the response from STC concerning their preliminary review for the encroachment permit, we did address that at the last public hearing, last evening of public hearing, and Mr. Scott Hescott and Dan Ville indicated that that's just a preliminary finding. As the commission is well aware, we cannot file an application for an encroachment permit until we have approvals, all local approvals, including approvals from this commission. You did ask us to send in the proposal to the state DOT for their preliminary comments. We did do that. We did receive them back. And as Mr. Ville and Mr. Hescott indicated at the last evening of public hearing, the items that were requested when we do submit the application for an encroachment permit are not problematic relative to complying with them. There were with regards to Mr. Hanfield's comments, I know that there were testimony concerning the slopes and the retaining wall, access to it. Commissioner Zigmont raised the compaction issue. And I believe that Mr. Hanfield, as was discussed at the prior hearing in his subsequent report to the commission, I can certainly, I don't want to speak for Mr. Hanfield, but he did indicate that certain consultants, geotech consultants, for example, and others be retained during the construction process to ensure that the compaction is being addressed, the compaction issues relative to whatever was there beforehand, and to monitor the slopes and soil and erosion control measures. Again, we have no objection to that. There was I know that there was a request that my client retain an arborist. He did do so. It's my understanding that arborist is registered as a registered arborist. Apparently does not have the word consulting registered arborist in front of his name. In this case, it's a gentleman, Graver, that does require him joining another, from what I understand and have been advised, joining another association. But again, we did submit a letter from a registered arborist confirming that, in their opinion, that there's the landscaping buffer that was asked to be addressed is all likely to be preserved. If the commission would like to have as a condition of approval that another arborist with the qualifications, with this other qualification that I'm just quite frankly not familiar with as a consulting arborist, I've worked with registered licensed arborists before, as I'm sure the commission has, my client would have no objection to that. I'm not sure, Madam Chairwoman, if Mr. Ville is there in attendance at the moment. I know I just reached out to Mr. Snow and Mr. Ville was not there yet.
He is, Chris. He's present.
He is. Okay. Well, thank you. I didn't get a text. Thank you. And I know that just had some questions for Mr. Ville, and maybe he can do some further explanation relative to, I know that he had addressed the snow shelf locations. I don't know if that's something that we can call out, Mr. Ville, this evening. And I was just also going to ask you if, in your opinion, you felt that the slopes and the retaining wall are not going to create a public safety issue and can be constructed subject to final detailed plans being generated as proposed in your plans, and whether the separation distance between the parking and the buildings in that one location is adequate, and if the lighting is adequate as you relative to the site design that you prepared. And then I have just a few closing questions for you, but I know if you could address the snow shelf issue, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Mr. Ville.
For the record, Daniel Ville from Zubik Inc., representing the applicant. I'm the professional engineer of record. The snow shelf we discussed at the last public hearing, there was a figure that I shared on the screen at that time, and I have sent over a copy of that to Maureen for the record. So I have nothing to add on snow shelf unless it's required. Okay.
Well,
Boy, you're quick.
Just came in.
well,
I sent it from the podium. Anyway.
that's nice.
So that's the discussion we had, and the snow shelves are shown in red there. And then
Okay.
I think Chris had some other questions he wanted me to address as well.
I did, and for the record, Chris Smith, Mr. Ville, in your opinion, is the separation distance between the parking area and the buildings adequate and does not create a safety issue?
That's correct.
And relative to the lighting, is it your opinion that the lighting as designed is adequate, sufficient for the proposed residential community?
Yes, it is.
And with your driveway design and internal parking and driveway design for this site, in your opinion, is it safe and adequate for pedestrian and vehicular traffic associated with the residential development?
Yes, it is.
And is it your opinion that the slopes and the retaining wall, in particular, that the retaining wall can be constructed as designed in your plans?
Yes, yes, it can.
And as to the compaction and other issues that Mr. Hanfield indicated, that there could be conditions relative to a certain level of or qualified professional engineer or geotech, I believe, engineer being retained to review the final plans. Is that something that you think is typical and is not a problem?
I would take no exception to Mr. Hanfield's suggestions regarding compaction and geotechnical requirements based on his letter dated October 4th.
And again, the preliminary comments that were received from the state DOT STC relative to the request for their preliminary comments concerning what will hopefully at some point be an application for an encroachment permit. Is it your opinion that those items that were listed in the DOT STC response are not major issues or minor and can be addressed quite readily when the application for the encroachment permit is submitted to the state post receiving any and all required municipal approvals?
Yes,
And in your professional opinion, do you believe that any component and or conduct associated with the site development proposal will result in an adverse impact to a substantial public interest?
it will not.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chairwoman, I have no further questions. Just wanted to go over those points and thank you for the opportunity to go over those with Mr. Bill. And I stand corrected. I apologize. The arborist is for the other application that is next on your agenda. But sorry, but my apologies for that. But
No,
I don't turn it over to the commission if you have any further questions for us.
Yeah, I'm sure the commission will have some further questions, and I know that you're trying to get off to a flight too, so. Anyway, commission, at this point, do we have any questions for Mr. Bill?
One question, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Eichen.
Out of curiosity, just to sort of probe the response about traffic, why is it your opinion that vehicular traffic is safe for this project?
Well, the interior traffic, the interior circulation is designed based on typical parking lot layout as described in your regulations. For traffic, I'd defer to the traffic engineer, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else have a question for Mr. Bill?
I
Go ahead.
I apologize, Chris Smith. I'm not sure I heard that question from the commissioner correctly, but I think Mr. Bill, I think the question was inquiring, there was a follow-up to Mr. Bill's testimony that the internal driveway and parking system as designed will not result in an adverse impact. Maybe I misunderstood the question.
I can
but
repeat
think-
that. Attorney Smith, the question was based on your questioning of Mr. Ville and his response that, in his opinion, there was no concerns about traffic. I was just asking him what his basis for that response was, and he gave a pretty concise answer about the parking. And now I guess we're going to hear from the traffic expert about the traffic.
My apologies. That was the question to Dan, to Mr. Bill, was with the internal system with the parking. You're correct.
Thank you, Attorney
Okay.
Smith.
Mr. Bill, you may not want to go too far, but there may be follow-up questions for you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Guled Mahmood. I work with F.A. Hesketh and Associates. I'm here filling in for Scott Hesketh, who cannot make it. I do have 10 copies of a statement he made. I can read that out right now. I'm unable to attend the public hearing on October 12th, 2023 due to a previous engagement. I would like to state for the record that is my professional opinion. The site generated traffic associated with this proposed residential development can be readily accommodated in the existing roadway network. It is further my opinion that the traffic volumes associated with this proposed residential development will not result in a detrimental impact to health and safety of the public, and that the site design components, conduct, including traffic associated with the proposal, will not result in an adverse impact to a substantial public interest. I can hand out copies of this letter now if you see fit.
Yes, please, that'd be great.
And in response directly to your question, we have submitted a traffic impact letter detailing our analysis that we conducted. We have also updated our manual attorney accounts at the request of the commission. And our analysis shows that our analysis shows that there will not be adverse impact as outlined in that letter and previous statements by Scott Hesketh.
Thank you.
Okay, questions for the traffic expert at this time?
Not for traffic.
No, not for traffic? Okay, is there something else that you want to ask Mr. Mahmood about?
I don't believe he's the appropriate person to direct the question to, but I'll ask the question and let the applicant decide. With respect to the steep slopes on the property, I know that a lot of emphasis in our last meeting was focused on the maintenance of the slopes around the I guess what would be the north and rear perimeter, and Commissioner Zigmont had asked questions specific to deposition of snow and where snow would end up going. And my recollection, when we were talking about the steep slopes on the north and west side of the property, was that the area would have a tendency to overgrow rather quickly if there was not some maintenance plan in place. We didn't talk about the rapid regrowth that would occur in the steep areas that were proposed for snow load deposition. And I see that as being similar to the area that would be north and west of the structures themselves. Our consultants are recommending that there be an operations and maintenance plan in place. I haven't heard any testimony this evening that addresses those comments from our consultants, and wondering what the response is to that.
For the record, Danville, I did review Brandon's comments, and there will be an operations manual forthcoming with a comment in each category that he has laid out. Maintenance of the slopes, to Brandon's point and to your point, will be covered in that maintenance document, and it will be submitted. So as per that suggestion, I think he said it would be a condition of approval and would comply. Regarding snow deposition, the figure that we looked at earlier actually shows the snow being deposited on flatter areas of the site. And the steep slopes behind the north buildings and to the west of the retaining wall, we talked about trimming vegetation, so that will be included in the maintenance plan. I think that covers it. Do you want to share that figure again, Maureen? Also regarding the sort of preservation of the steep slopes, the plan includes erosion control matting, so there won't be erosion potential after the site is stabilized with those mats, right? Those are intended to remain permanently. So then it's just a matter of mowing and trimming. 3-to-1 slopes are considered mowable. Steeper than that would require more like a brush removal type treatment. So you can see the 4 areas in red that we've highlighted there. The central one is actually sorry, the one next to the building in the front of to the right, that one there. Thanks. That one's actually in a depression. And then the one at the north side of the property, that one's relatively flat, not a steep slope. And obviously the ones internal to the site in the island there and on the emergency access way, those are, excuse me, adjacent to, not over the emergency access route. those are relatively flat.
I'm just, when I look at the plan, and so it's hard for me to envision when you're looking at a flat piece of paper or, flat picture, basically. But that westernmost stretch of parking, it's going to be hard to maneuver all the snow from that back section all the way to the front of the property. So is that what the plan is to maneuver all of that, push all of that around to the front on both sides? Or is there going to be removal? Is there a plan to be removing? What's the plan?
Typically in sites like this, we'd use loaders, not just plows. So there is some picking it up and moving it type of action that takes place on these sites. Yeah. It's not just plowing.
So what are the circumstances that would require, I guess, how much snow would have to fall to require that the snow be removed from the site versus deposited on the site?
I'm not sure I can give you an accurate estimate on the spot. I'm sorry, I have to respond to that at another time. I think
Okay.
if we look at the impervious area of the site, which is 60 or 70% range, that means that the remainder of it is green space, and it could be suitable for stockpiling of snow. I haven't been exactly generous in my layout of the areas where snow can be stockpiled here. The southwest corner offers some space. The northwest corner offers some space. Obviously, we can't throw it off the wall, being there's a fence there, but
Well, plus you're gonna have landscaping, right? You have a landscaping plan with lots of nice plants that you're not gonna wanna be piling snow on top of. I don't imagine. Just kind of curious what the plan is. It just seems like a big area to try to maneuver all of that. I'm also thinking that the one dumpster is a small space or small size for the size of what the proposed facility is. Hard to tell because I don't know what the size is that's proposed, but it seems inadequate.
off the
If
top
I
of my
may,
head,
Chris, oh, sorry, Dan.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just, Chris Smith, for the record, just wanted to indicate that the maintenance plan that would be prepared relative to slopes and the retaining wall would be something that would in all likelihood be generated with the consultant that Mr. Hanfield had indicated as a condition of approval could be retained for the purpose of overseeing that when that does occur, when the construction of the retaining wall occurs, or when the permit and that would have to be prepared before the permit, building permit is secured. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Mr. Dyken, did you have a follow-up
I'm
question?
sure you can't come up with an answer with scientific precision for Commissioner Dorsey, but could the property handle, let's say, a foot of snow overnight? Is there enough space to pile up snow of that magnitude?
In my opinion, yes.
For the record, I brought up the grading plan.
Yeah. Other questions?
Just more of a comment. Looking at the snow storage spot that's in the depression, to the northeast. I see you have mailboxes in the way as well as plantings and then a guardrail as well. It doesn't really seem accessible to, snow removal equipment. And then the other comment I would like to make is we did touch on it last meeting and, I'm not seeing any additional dumpster space, just based off the square foot, guessing based off the square footage there. That's very insufficient for 52 units. It almost seems that it would be appropriate that each building block have their own dumpster, especially when you consider that all the way to the north, people are gonna have to carry their garbage across the entire site to dump it. I can see this becoming very messy very quick.
The other thing too, I noticed is that there's no garages here, are there?
Correct.
All right, so everybody's parking outside. So all those parking spaces all around that circle thing, everything is basically pavement. So if you're gonna get a foot of snow, where are the cars gonna go so you can plow? Or you're gonna plow them in and then they have to shovel themselves out and back out and then the plow has to go? I'm not sure how that works.
For the record, Attorney Megan Hope with Alter and Pearson. Just a quick comment regarding the snow storage. What's typical in complexes like this is there is a snow plan that's in your lease agreement. And what happens is you typically provide your cell phone number to the operator of the complex. After a snowstorm, they send out a mass text that says, the day after the snow stops at a certain time, you need to move for your cars because we're coming in and plowing. And typically what happens, and this has been my personal experience when I've lived in an apartment, is that everybody leaves. They clear the site with the different equipment, like Dan was talking about, typically plows and other loader equipment. And then when that time frame is back or done, everybody comes back with their cars. Regarding trash, Mr. Snow just indicated that they are able to pick up trash more frequently if the commission feels that the dumpster size is inadequate. So instead of once a week, he could pick it up twice a week. That could be an option.
Commission, questions? So when you lived at this apartment complex and you got a text message that says we're gonna plow, where did you go?
Typically, I would go to Starbucks or something like
Okay.
that, like get a coffee,
So-
or a lot of times I would be at work already, so it didn't matter.
Yeah, but I mean, if
yeah.
you were handicapped, or maybe if you were elderly and renting the apartment, I mean, where are these folks gonna go? I mean, I just think it's kind of odd that you would get a text message. I understand the purpose of that is everyone has to get their car out. But I'm wondering, what if these people don't have any place to go? Or what if they don't feel safe driving on the roads? Or what if they can't get out of the complex because the snow is built up? And
Madam Chairwoman Chris Smith, having lived in a condominium complex myself at one point in time for about 3.5 years, my experience was that whenever it snowed and the cars were parked in a similar configuration, just like this, they just plowed on the outside through the drive patterns and you just shoveled around your car and backed it out and left. And then they came back generally later, if they had to, clean up those spots where the cars had been parked, just as it works in a city street, for example. But that was my experience. I did not, I'm dating myself, but when I was in that situation, they weren't texting us. They just came in, plowed, and they put it on the snow shelved areas. And then we just backed our car out. We had a shovel, just like you would in your driveway, and just shoveled out behind it, pulled the car out and left. And so, I think that I think managing snow in a multifamily residential community, and again, having lived in one, with the snow shelf areas, I honestly just don't think it's an issue. But I just wanted to state that on the record too, since Attorney Hope had her experience but mine was that they just
Yeah.
plowed the drive areas, the aisles, and you just shoveled out your car just like you would that small 2 foot, whatever it was, just as you do in your residential home, if once they plow the street at the end of your driveway. But anyways, that was my experience.
yeah,
And Mr. Snow can comment on any experience he has with that too, so.
yeah. All right, Commission, any other questions at this point?
I have others.
Yes, let's go.
I
Well, we are in the
more
public
questions
hearing.
on the slope. you said, I think it was a 3-to-1 slope is mowable. Is that accurate? So is it, is a 3-to-1 slope also accessible from building maintenance perspective with respect to replacement of lighting or repair of the structure or windows or access for fire apparatus? I'm just curious what your response is to that.
Sure. The 3-to-1 slope, if it's mowable, then it is walkable. And we've also added to the perimeter of all of the buildings, a level shelf or nearly level shelf that allows, I think I graded it out 4 or 5 feet. So only at 4 or 5 feet from the building does the slope even begin. We haven't counted for access to the perimeter of the building.
So is 4 or 5 feet away from the building, long enough ledge, to enable, someone to safely place a ladder to get to the upper areas of the buildings that are proposed?
I am not an expert in that, and what I can say is that the fire marshal did review the grading plan as it stands, and he had no issues with access to the building. From a maintenance perspective, I'd have to refer to someone in that operational capacity.
Okay, and then, I'm not sure if this question is for you, perhaps maybe Jennifer, the question may be to you. With respect to the easements that are needed for, the north and western side of the property. It's my understanding that there's maybe what I would understand as a verbal or very informal agreement. We have recommendations that, that perhaps approval could be conditional upon an easement like that, but what happens if no such easement comes to fruition?
So-
For the record, Chris Smith, then we would not be able to go forward with this particular plan. If you're talking about the easement, Commissioner, relative to the westerly side of the property,
Yes, sir.
yes. That would be a condition of approval as recommended by Mr. Hanfield, and if we weren't able to generate that, then we would not be in compliance with that condition. So the commission would be protected in that regard.
So
Yeah.
Can I reply to one of the?
Yes,
comments?
Maureen.
So I think it's copied in your packet and I thought it was forwarded to the applicant. Today I received correspondence from Steve Wozniak of the fire marshal with regard to that slope. Well, part of his letter includes that. Attorney Smith, can you confirm that you got that? I thought I forwarded everything, but you know, things were coming in rapid fire this afternoon yet again.
Yeah, yet again is right.
I'm reviewing what the email that you had forwarded to me, town planner Giusti. I'm just looking at it. My understanding is the fire marshal's office had looked at this. There's a reference to basement windows, complete code as the drawings are only conceptual. Obviously, as we indicated with the correspondence from the assistant building inspector, looks like most of these items will be addressed, just scrolling through them, with the final detailed construction plans that will be submitted to the town in support of obtaining a building permit, and that would be reviewed, I presume, as they usually are, by the building, not only your building inspector, but by your fire marshal to ensure that the final construction plans addressing these concerns that he makes reference in here are addressed. But that would be my response at this point. And he does note that there's no code requirement for the minimum distance to a slope. But he would certainly, most of the, I'm looking through these items, they appear to be items, as with the building inspector, that would be addressed with the final detailed drawings for the buildings themselves when they're submitted post zoning approval. Oh,
I don't know, yeah, this is the letter I was speaking of from Steve. I just. This is
If
the-
you're asking me to comment on what's highlighted, then there would be, the final plans would be adjusted or would address that. I can't see everything because of the block out on the right-hand side there with, who's on the Zoom.
8 to
Good
9.
move.
Effectively, in
moved
this
them on our
particular
screen.
groundwater would need to be replaced. May require an area, if that's required, then an area of the units affected by the slope just can be adjusted to accommodate the distance. Again, when the final detail construction plans are submitted, if that is necessary to address that base, the fire marshal assistant or fire marshal, excuse me, I apologize, Woznia references there, then that will be done. But that would be the next step with obtaining a building permit.
So I have a follow-up question to that then, because the testimony is that the flat area would be 5 feet from the building before the slope starts. The fire marshal is saying in his communication that to have a safe, to safely ladder the building, it would need to be 8 to 9 feet from the base of the building to safely reach the top floor. So if you extend the flat area out 9 feet, how does that change the slopes from that point out? They're going to be either steeper than 3 to 1. They would have to be steeper than 3 to 1. Is that correct?
Chris, do you want, this is Meg Hope for the record. Chris, do you want Dan to comment on that?
Yes, Meg, and Meg, I'm going to turn the presentation over to your more than capable hands, and I wish everyone a good night and thank you. And again, I apologize for not being able to be there, but this was a longstanding commitment that I had. But thank you.
No problem. Enjoy your flight home.
All right, so Dan, maybe if you could talk to the commission about, obviously you have known, we had that comment before, 1 minute ago, how you could design the site plan differently to address it by either, grading it differently or using a retaining wall or any other method you would use.
Danville for the record. So you're correct. If we were to expand the level shelf behind the building, then the slopes would either get steeper or a larger easement would be required to expand the limits of the slope.
A larger easement.
To run the slope out equally far, right? So if we're extending the shelf 4 or 5 feet, then the slope runs out 4 or 5 feet to maintain the 3 to 1 slope. Steeper slopes are plantable and can be maintained. Steeper than 3 to 1. We can go to 2 to 1 and install erosion control matting. If the slope gets steep in a way that's not maintainable, then you could conceivably put a retaining wall there.
How high would it make that retaining wall? We're already at 18 feet, is that right?
So the retaining wall, I think we're talking about to the north now more than we are talking about because if we're talking about access to the buildings, I think we're talking about the slope on the north side of the plan.
Buildings 1 and 2.
Buildings 1 and 2, the rear. So there's no retaining wall there at present. If we were to extend that, the level shelf 5 feet, say, and the slope were 2 to 1, then the wall would be something less than 5 feet. It might be 2.5 feet.
Could you explain to me how the erosion control matting works? Is that something that has a lifespan of several years that enables stabilization of the slope when plants grow and the roots develop? Is that how, that's what the intention is? So what's the
So
life
for
of
a
the-
slope that is 2 to 1, we would recommend some kind of matting that is biodegradable in nature, right? And wait for vegetation to establish. When you seed a slope that is steeper than 3 to 1, you seed it with plants that are not grass, that we're not gonna try and mow, right? It might be more like meadow type plantings. Or if you're in a sensitive area, you might plant a conservation seed, and then you start to see like wetland type plants and things like that. So you would, like you pointed out, biodegradable matting seeded with something that you wouldn't intend to mow after.
I view that as an area that is very susceptible to invasive species like Japanese knotweed and stuff like that. Just my thought. Very hard to get rid of once it's there.
So the seed on this project is specified, I believe conservation seed is specified for slopes steeper than 3 to 1.
Mhm.
So hopefully by seeding it with native plants and desirable plants, we'll be able to keep out the quick uptake of an invasive species. And I know, I have to rip it out too.
But can I go back to this 8 foot, which is the fire marshal, the 8 to 10 feet, level, or should I say platform? What do we want? Yeah, because we need to shelf it. We need to shelf it. So if you are gonna have to go back 8 to 10, or 8 to 9 feet, and there is no arrangement with the adjacent property owners, what does that do to your complex?
Sure. So I think how I'd like to respond to that question is in a couple different ways. I think the first is that we've met with the fire marshal different times. He hadn't mentioned this point. If he had previously, we would have incorporated into the plan. I think the commission can definitely make a condition of approval that we need to have that 8 to 9 feet that he's discussing in his email today as a condition of approval. So we are comfortable if that's added by the commission. That obviously creates some changes that would need to be done to the plan. So the two options there are one, see if we can get an expanded easement area so that we can continue to have that 3 to 1 slope. So the 8 to 9 foot shelf and the 3 to 1 slope. The other option is if we can't get that extended easement area is to build a retaining wall to keep it within our property. So those would be the two options. Again, as we mentioned previously, there would be the condition of approval that we have to get the signed easement and have it recorded before we go in for the building permit and construction process. So if we don't get that easement, then we can't do the project anyways.
I think I would suggest to you that you have an additional option, and that would be to reduce the size of your buildings and move them in.
Oh, that's a good point.
That's not something we're gonna consent to now. I think we would pursue the other two options, which would be the retaining wall or obtaining additional easement area to do the 3 to 1 slope.
I've just, and I'm not sure who would answer this question, but when we go looking at the retaining wall, we're already bringing in 17 feet of fill. And then you're gonna go up another 4 feet, not 4 feet, 40 feet. And you're gonna build this retaining wall, because isn't it supposed to be, aren't the buildings going to be 4 levels?
3 levels.
Okay. So you have that, no, okay, but still this is on top of fill. And you're gonna have a retaining wall. And I'm just wondering what's gonna happen to the property in back that's not your property. I mean, what are we doing to that? Are we just actually, because if you're gonna have a retaining wall that's gonna be how tall?
14 feet.
14 feet?
Sure.
So something that's gonna be 14 feet, what is that going to, how is that gonna impact your neighbor's property?
Yeah, so I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have Dan come up and explain how he designed this site. And my understanding is if we're looking at the site on that westerly portion, so that's the side with the retaining wall. I'm gonna have Dan discuss how we're bringing in the fill, we're putting in the retaining wall, And there obviously is a certain height of the retaining wall when you're in the parking lot, from like the grade of the parking lot to the top of the wall.
Yeah, so they don't
That's-
drive off the cliff.
Well, no, you
Yeah.
won't drive off the cliff, right?
Well, yeah, that's the.
We
purpose
have,
of
we have
putting a
obviously,
cap on it.
there's part of that, but if you walk to the back of that retaining wall, that's where you have that 14 feet. And then Dan, if you could maybe explain how the grade ties into and connects to the existing grade, I think that would be helpful.
So the reveal of the wall facing the neighboring property is about 14 feet. I don't have I can't see closely on the plans, but it's about 14 feet. There's a small shelf on the back side of the wall, so it's walkable and mowable to be maintainable as described earlier and as will be described in our maintenance plan. Beyond that, you'll notice the slope is 3-to-1. It's a gentle slope behind the wall. And in that area, we're not doing much filling. The idea is that the fill is really contained by the wall. So, from the lot behind, like I said, you'll see a 3-to-1 slope and you'll see a wall. And we've talked in previous meetings about the finish on that wall not being plain gray concrete, but that there be some color or texture to the wall.
It still doesn't give me a warm fuzzy feeling to have a 14-foot wall there. And I'm not sure how you're gonna maintain it. I know that you're saying you're gonna have, you're gonna slope it off. I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Sure. So I think what Dan has indicated for the record is that he's designed this so there is access to the back side of the wall. There is an area where a maintenance worker could go to maintain it. And then what he's done with the rest of the area, that area between the west side of the wall and then going in further west in those limits of grading is that he's gently sloped that at a 3-to-1 slope so that it is mowable. But that at the end of it, it ties into the existing grade on the neighbor's property.
So how far from the base of the wall to the property line? To your actual property line where you're. I mean, how much are we talking about? Is it 20 feet? Is it 10 feet? Is it 5 or?
I think based on the plan before you, it's probably between 5 and 10.
So it's 5 to 10 feet. So that's your buffer from the base of the wall to the property line.
I haven't scaled it, but that's my understanding
Okay.
from what I can see here.
Scale the wall or?
Oh, no.
Scale the
No, scale the plans.
Oh, oh.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Chairwoman, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's
I don't
okay.
think, I don't think that they've answered your question though, because the easement, the abutting property is also to the north side of this project. And that's
Oh.
the area where if they extend the level area from 5 feet to 8 or 9 feet, is going to change the slope and impact the abutting property.
So if we were to construct, say, hypothetically, a retaining wall on the north side of the property to get an extra 5 feet of shelf. 5 feet on a 2-to-1 slope is 2.5 feet of vertical. So the reveal on the neighbor's side of that wall would be 2.5 feet. If the slope as shown stays the same and I draw a line in it, right, to level out the top.
Say that again for me.
Yeah.
If I build a wall, so in the gray area there, right, if I build a wall on the north side,
Okay,
halfway down the slope, put it right there. And we're attempting to extend the shelf by 5 feet. The slope is 2-to-1. And so the reveal, the sort of exposed height of the wall would be half of that 5 feet you're asking for. It would be 2.5 feet tall. So that's the nature of the wall that you might put there to extend that shelf by 5 feet.
And would the grading go any further into?
No, the
The
toe
lot?
of the toe of that slope and its pitch would remain the same.
I still think you have not answered the question, which is how do you protect the abutting property from being impacted
What type of impact? Are you talking stormwater or a visual impact? I think that maybe.
I think it's all.
Perhaps all of it.
Yeah, so I think what Dana said is if there was a retaining wall put in, it would be approximately 2 feet of visibility from the neighboring property to the north. So I don't think that that's an unreasonable impact for a neighboring property owner. Can you explain a little bit about what's happening with stormwater on the north side of the site?
Yeah, so the stormwater behind those buildings, is just the area that falls on the grass and would run down the slope across the property line, which is what it does in its current condition, although the current condition is a little bit flatter. It's a really small tributary area. So even in a moderate storm, I don't think that you would see surface flow across that property line. Not in any measurable depth.
Dan, is the amount of stormwater that's coming off the site now increasing in that peak analysis?
The peak flow rate is not going to increase. The peak discharge rate does not increase with the current design due to the detention measures that we have installed underground.
Do those detention measures intercept what's coming off the turnpike?
Are they connected to?
No, the runoff from the turnpike is not impacted. The amount of runoff from the turnpike is not impacted by our project. So we do not capture it. We simply, there's a DOT pipe under the proposed driveway that would remain and continue to carry that stormwater.
So I'm not suggesting that you would have anything to do with the water coming from the turnpike, except that the water coming from the turnpike has the potential to impact that northern tributary area. Is that correct?
Yeah, the outlet for the DOT drainage is a few feet, well, actually now many feet lower than our project, right? So it's a few feet lower than the existing property, and it'll be quite a few feet lower than our project when the bill is imported.
Can I ask a question? Let me ask a question. The area in the front along the turnpike, this, I guess you want to call it the swale, because there's a 10-foot difference there from your entrance way down into where you're proposing to store snow or your excess stuff there. How far is, that's right up against the turnpike, correct? That's basically.
Well, the swale is located all in the DOT right of way. And I'm not proposing any grading change really to the sides of the swale.
Okay, so my follow-up question is, you get a snowstorm and DOT sends its trucks out to clear off the turnpike. And they don't go gently in the snow, they fly through. And the first thing they do is they aim their trucks and it just flies off the road. You're gonna have DOT filling in that swale before you guys have a chance to. I mean, you're gonna get a lot of snow.
So
from
the
DOT.
right of way line shown here, right? DOT can dispose of their snow within their right of way as they see fit, but none of the snow shelf areas that I drew are within.
Can I
DOT.
quote you on that? Because every time the DOT or the town of Berlin goes by my house, boy, they throw it well into my driveway. And I'm left with a mess trying to clean up.
So what you might notice here is that the DOT owns about, I don't know, 30, 40 feet off the edge of the road.
This is the way. Okay,
This line here, right?
Yeah, that line.
wait, I got the green dot over there. What?
Sorry, you.
What?
This here?
No,
Is that better?
oh, yeah, just don't put it on me.
So everything I drew is on our side of the right of way line, and the DOT owns the majority of that swale.
All right, so they own a majority of swale, but you may be depositing the snow there. Your snow.
No,
No.
not based on what I drew.
Okay, so you're gonna stay on your side of the swale.
Correct.
And DOT is gonna keep all its snow on their side of the swale.
Wouldn't swear to that.
All right, well, that's a problem. No.
It's pretty far to throw snow, though. I mean, it is at least 30 feet from the edge of the road.
Oh, well, Okay, questions? I see Mr. Rogan.
Yes,
comment?
so in order to make the correction behind the buildings to the north, are you saying that you need an easement to the north to fix your slope?
Well, it would depend. Like I said, we can build a wall and there would be no change to the toe of the slope, or we could extend the slope further, right? We can make the shelf 5 feet larger and extend the toe 5 feet out, or we can,
I just ask because I know that you have a handshake agreement or a verbal agreement with the people to the west of the project. I'm just wondering if is it the same parcel owner?
it's the same owner to my knowledge, and the details of the easements are the same on both sides of the property, the dimensions and the terms.
Any other questions?
Yeah, and they're okay. I see all your outlets go onto their property for all your stormwater, and you have okay agreement with them to, you know,
That is yeah, the stormwater discharge is part of the utility easement agreement. And also the stormwater presently flows across the property lines. And we've done everything we can to mitigate the increase in flow rate, so the flow rate will not increase. Up to and including the 100-year theoretical storm.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Yeah, please.
Vincent, add a question.
Yes.
So in the zoning regulations, and again, I'm trying to flip to those, I didn't do that technical review, Brandon did. But our zoning regulations do call for a 3-to-1. Section 11C3D, so 10C3D with regard to fill, and it. Read that sentence. I'm sorry, because I couldn't pull it up on my screen.
Okay,
because I'm
but-
sharing my screen.
All right, that's okay.
Subsection 3D says the final grade of any filled slope shall not exceed 1 foot of vertical rise per 3 feet of horizontal distance.
And that was a quick search, and I don't know if Brandon has further information with regard to looking through our regulations. I'm not putting them on the spot. I just wanted to call that out, that sloping is a matter. And also to continue with Commissioner Rogan's comment with regard to the easement. We did have concerns with the easement or the information from the abutting property owner that was received as far as authorization and forwarded on October 5th at 2:45. I forwarded some suggested easement language recommendations from Attorney Capola's office that we haven't heard a response to. We
So,
haven't gotten
okay.
a response to that, so for the record, I think that should be
Okay,
addressed.
Sure, I can answer that. I believe Chris felt that he did respond to it in his opening remarks when he said that it would be a condition of approval, that we would have to enter into a formal easement. That's what he had indicated to me was our position on those comments.
You haven't heard, your office hasn't heard anything back regarding anything formal about an easement from the adjacent just,
No, we haven't gotten any updated information with regard to the budding owners and who's authorized or whatever.
There are
It would-
multiple.
It is multiple owners of that property.
you know, it seems a little convoluted. It's a little muddied. We're looking at a plan for something that is not entirely locked down as far as the acreage needed for it, or the parcel needed for it. In other words, we're planning on somebody else's property technically now. And I'm uncomfortable with that. I'm uncomfortable the fact that this discussion is going around in the background and everyone's shaking hands and everyone's saying no problem, but we don't have anything in writing. And I would think as an attorney, and I think Attorney Smith would probably agree, and I think Attorney Capola will agree, that, the handshake and a pat on the back is okay for the olden days, but today, if you don't have it in writing, it's not really worth anything. And so that concerns, that's a concern of mine.
It was raised last time and it sounds like, based upon what Attorney Hope is saying, that Attorney Smith is indicating that he's had a different experience than what my experience has been, because typically that when you're talking about easements to this extent, they are upfront. They are something that is part of the record, the agreement between the parties, but he's indicating he's had a different experience.
Yeah, and I
So I
don't
think
doubt it. It's
that's
just
what's
for the
going on.
commission, I'm not sure.
And I think the proposed condition that was in your consultant's memo dated 10-4 protects the commission, because if the applicant is unsuccessful in getting the easement, then we don't have a project.
Mhm.
So it's not as if, oh, we're not gonna get the easement and we're still just gonna go onto their property and do it. We want to be able to.
Oh, no, you would
Yeah,
not be
right.
able to do that
But
legally.
I think we're all on the same page with that component
Yeah,
of it.
that's gotta be, that's gotta be a concern.
So is that truly definitive? Something is flashing.
Is that screen flashing too?
This-
That
Some-
screen is.
This one
flashing.
is, I
Is
think
that
that one is not.
Okay.
I don't know.
So back to the easement topic. How definitive is that with respect to a condition of approval? Would they be able to begin development of the easternmost part of the parcel that wouldn't impact that area?
So I would say, and I hear Attorney Hope saying no. Yes, we're in agreement. No, they should not be.
The-
given
This site
the
can't be
extent.
filled without the easement, so the site cannot be filled
Well,
without the
yeah.
easement. There's no construction that could take place.
So the filling has to be done. To do the filling, you have to have the easement.
Because it runs out to.
Gotcha.
And the way the condition of approval is that we can't get any permits until we have that easement, so.
Okay. All right, commissioners, I'm gonna look over here and see. Do we have any questions? I mean, we are still in the public hearing too, so I want to make sure that I swing around to the public.
I'm interested to hear from our consultants as to whether or not they concur with what's being represented tonight
Okay, well,
from Brandon and from
Yep.
Glenn.
does Glenn want, Mr. Chandler, do you want to make any comments at this point? We're in the public hearing. Oh, okay. Well, then we'll go to Zoom land. Oh, yeah. I think he's unmuted now.
Good evening, everybody. Brandon Hanfield for the record with the Antic River Consultants, professional engineer. So what I've heard is they've agreed or have no objection to most of the conditions that I recommended. And I'll highlight the major ones. So the existing fill conditions was raised as a concern at least 2 meetings. In terms of the filling that occurred in the history of the property. Obviously, I was not aware of that filling or how it was put in, but I understand the concern and recommended a third-party geotechnical engineer evaluate that fill and make sure it is suitable for construction of a residential structure as well as parking lots, driveways, etc. They've agreed to that, and I think that is a prudent thing to do. Same goes for the proposed fill. I think they have no objection to bringing on a third-party geotechnical engineer to monitor, not only monitor, but also design the actual structural or control fill that will be placed on that property. And that also coincides with the retaining wall itself. So the retaining wall does hold back most of that fill on the west side. And in design of that retaining wall, they'll need a structural engineer to design it, and that structural or control fill will be part of it. So with that third party design and oversight, I think we can have a certain level of confidence that it is going to be done properly. And I believe the most important part of that is that work needs to be done before a building permit can be issued. And I think that also might have been a comment from the building official himself that the fill has to be placed, certified, before building permit can be issued. So we have a certain level of confidence that that 10 to 18 feet of fill will be in place. It'll be certified, compacted in accordance with our design, and suitable for construction of a residential structure. So I think that was an important one there, and hearing no objection, I think that is a safeguard we can rely on. Let's see here. So I don't think we got the stormwater, but I will touch on the steep slopes and the maintenance of those steep slopes and what would change. So I did recommend an operation as a maintenance plan. That was in part due to the conversation we had last meeting and about how to maintain steep slopes. Can they be maintained? And there is some level of handwork that will be required for anything over 3 to 1. It is done. I've seen it done. And I think in recommending this operation and maintenance plan, it has to be put on paper. So not only what will be done, but how often it will be done, who will be responsible, what the reporting will be to the town to give you confidence that it's being performed adequately. So all those things get outlined in that maintenance plan. And it is something the town has on file that can be used to make sure that's what's been presented to you over the course of these meetings and in the hearings will actually be performed on the site to make sure it is a safe site, a maintained site, and a clean site. And that rate goes also back down to the trash and recycling. It is a smaller dumpster pad area, and there's ways of addressing when dumpster pads are, I wouldn't say undersized, but smaller. So you get more frequent pickups. Trash and recycling, the roll-offs can be smaller, but obviously you need to have them picked up more often, and you have to ensure that there's no trash or recycling or debris or litter outside of the limits of that enclosed area. So that is something we'd be looking at in the maintenance and operations plan, as well as the snow storage as well. So there are going to be some challenges in any winter storm that's a foot or more. But I think that where they store it, how they manage the residents that live there, how they deal with emergency situations, which are excessive snowfalls or repeat snowfalls in excess of 6 inches. So all of those things will be outlined. And again, it's a level of confidence that things will be performed really at the benefit of the residents that will be there. Let's see here. Covered. And I'm reviewing the letter that was provided by Mr. Charlder, and my comments were kind of intertwined into that letter. And I want to make sure I cover everything. I will speak to the slopes. So to provide some feedback on the northern side of the site and providing a 9-foot shelf. I agree it can be done. That was one of the reasons we pointed that out early on in the process, was to make sure that you, not only maintenance professionals, but fire professionals can get around the entire building. So hearing or seeing what the fire marshal wrote about needing 8 or 9 feet for a ladder makes sense, since most ladders, I think, have a safe working platform of 4 to 1. So with a 30 to 40 foot high building, we need 8 or 9 feet away from the building to make sure that ladder's safe. They could extend out that flat area, and I do think if they were to grade it out, it would impact the easement that's proposed to you. I do agree a retaining wall could be built. And one thing I'll say is I don't think it'll be a 2.5 foot high wall. I think you'd end up with more like a 4 or 5 foot high exposed wall. And that's because at the bottom of that wall, you again need a maintenance shelf at the bottom of that wall that would be relatively flat. So we wouldn't have a 2 to 1 slope. At the bottom of that wall, you'd have a 4 or 5 foot flat shelf. And, at a 2 to 1 slope, that would add 2 to 3 feet to the height of that wall. So not a super high wall, but I think it's not 2.5 feet, it's probably closer to 4 or 5. And then the last thing I'll comment on is the very long zoning reference that Maureen, was it a 3 to 1 maximum slope requirement in the regulations?
Yeah, that's what we found. quickly. Not finding another provision, but
So I'm not familiar with that provision in the regulations. I reviewed the grading in my earliest letter more from the standpoint of the erosion control manual and safe engineering practices that are standard in our industry. So anything steeper than 2 to 1 would require engineered measures to make sure they're stable after they're placed. 3 to 1 is typically acceptable. So I looked at it from the point of anything over 2 to 1. We needed to make sure that there was another professional involved in the design of those slopes, or they change them to 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. They've done that. In my experience, 2 to 1 is an adequate slope. But recognizing you have a zoning regulation I wasn't aware of, I think they've done all they can to make sure that the 2 to 1 slope is stable. And as part of that, I recommended in this as well, a third party professional engineer or qualified erosion control professional to be on site for the duration of construction, monitor the placement of the fill, monitor erosion controls and the maintenance of those controls, make sure the slopes are stable for the duration, implement changes as they see fit, provide reports to commission or the town for the duration of construction, and at the end, certify that everything was performed in accordance with your regulations and the erosion control manual. So again, it was more of a safeguard of making sure there's eyes on that site, and it's not just leaning on the contractor to ensure that everything is stable. And part of that is because of the proximity of all the fill to the abutting property owner. I believe that covers the major items that I put in my latest letter. Again, they were more suggestions and recommendations on how, if this project does go forward, there are certain safeguards and third-party qualified professionals that can assist the commission and the town to make sure the project is successful.
Okay, I think Commissioner Jorsey has a question for you.
I have
Mhm.
two, actually, Brandon. Would it be an obligation on the part of the third-party engineer to verify that fill that is brought in is appropriate material? Or would that need to be an additional condition in approval?
So the third-party engineer that I required or recommended for the proposed fill would be a geotechnical engineer, and that geotechnical engineer would specify the material that can be placed and how it can be placed, and then how it is tested to ensure it is adequate for controlled or structural fill. So it will be placed in lifts. It will be compacted to a certain level based on the material they specify. So any material they specify will have different levels of acceptable compaction based on moisture content and characteristics. So they would come up with that plan. It would be certified by that third-party geotechnical engineer, and then they would implement that plan and certify that it was placed appropriately in accordance with their design before a building permit can be issued. And that is what I recommended or suggested as a condition.
Okay, thank you for that. And then in discussing this evening, the runoff that comes from the Berlin Turnpike into the storm drain. Do you have any comment to offer about the potential for stormwater runoff that would go to this area that's being described to us as tributary, and the potential for it to erode the slopes and the retaining wall that's proposed for that northern part of the property?
So the drainage that comes from the state itself, it discharges to that, I guess, deep swale that's between the road and building 6, I believe. That condition's existing. It goes to a head wall. It's, I believe, a 15-inch culvert, and that culvert carries it in the northerly direction and discharges directly onto the abutting property. That condition won't change, and I don't see any adverse impact from this development on the state's drainage. To answer your question about will that discharge impact if they were to build a wall? I guess that lies in the details on how close the wall is to the discharge point. I would point to their proposed discharge, which is a new discharge point at the property line, or actually it's on the abutting property. That one there, yes, we would not want that pipe to discharge directly to the toe of any retaining wall slope. So if they did add a retaining wall, we'd want to make sure that it is not close enough to that discharge where any fill that was placed, it could erode away. So we would want to make sure the riprap protection is adequate. Right now, they do have riprap protection at the outlet. The velocities are low enough that riprap seems to be appropriate, and they are attenuating flow in their northerly retention system. And I will point, one of the earlier comments I had was how water gets to the abutting property. So right now, flow goes to the north from the state, as well as a small portion of the motel site. And then there's a portion of the site that drains to the west, and there's a saddle on the abutting property at the northwest corner. And the original plan had 2 discharge points to the north, so they were basically putting all their stormwater to the north. And one of the things I requested is they put discharge some of their water to the west to match existing conditions and not put more water to the north. They did do that. So they currently have a discharge point to the north and then another one to the west to respect that saddle that exists. So they did minimize the flow going to the north. They do have 1 discharge that's new. They are attenuating the peak flow rates appropriately. And from what I can see, the riprap outlet swale is adequate for existing proposed or current proposed conditions. If that were to change with a retaining wall, it's something we'd have to review. And I can only recommend if a retaining wall has to be added or an easement has to be changed, it could be considered a substantial change in this plan itself and might warrant coming back to the commission for review, as it is a change to the plan that you're currently reviewing. So if they have to add that retaining wall, perhaps it's something that has to come back and be reviewed by you.
Thank you.
Follow-up question. You said that the state discharges to the north to the adjacent properties currently, and that this development potentially has the ability to discharge also to the north and to the west. Am I correct so far?
Correct, yes.
But what kind of burden are you putting on the adjacent properties? I guess that's what I'm perplexed about, is why should that be allowed? Should it not be somehow directed to the Berlin Turnpike and carried away through that storm drainage system? Why are we dependent upon adjacent property owners that may want to do their own development? Why should they have to deal with runoff from the site?
Sure.
I guess I'm a little confused by that.
It's a very good question and a complicated answer. So when we do drainage, anytime the property is lower than the road, it drains to somebody else's property. And our obligation is to make sure we're not adversely impacting that abutting property. It's a sensitive issue and a difficult one to answer. And we usually point to the peak flow rates. So how much water is flowing to that property now? How much water will flow to that property when we're done? There is an inherent increase in peak flow rates whenever you develop something from woods or grass. And so they put in underground detention systems in this situation to hold the water and basically meter it out to equal what is currently discharging to that property. So in this case, they did show through their hydraulic analysis that the peak flow rates are attenuated adequately in that underground system. And one thing I'll point out is I don't believe as a conservative measure, they accounted for exfiltration or infiltration from that system. So, due to the gravel soils, I believe there will be a decent amount of infiltration back into the groundwater or into the ground. They didn't account for that. So it is a conservative measure. So yes, for one, they showed the peak flow rates are attenuated. They're not increasing them to the abutting property. And going back to my comment about where to discharge, the second sensitive point we try to look at is how the water is discharged to that property. And are you putting concentrated flow in an area that currently doesn't see concentrated flow? And in those cases, we try to level spread or dissipate the energy of the flow to make sure that we're not going to erode the condition of the abutting property. As I said, to the north, they're already getting concentrated flow from the DOT, and the location of the outlet they're showing is in close proximity to that outlet. So they're putting their quote unquote concentrated flow in the same general area that currently sees concentrated flow from the DOT. And I think that is a good practice. So to the north, they're putting it close. There is some signs of concentrated flow going through the woods in a northerly direction. I believe it all ends up in the same spot on this property, which is way to the north and west. Everything kind of comes to a confluence. So on the west side of the property, again, they're discharging to the west side. There's currently signs of discharge to that west side. They're attenuating the peak flows to the west side as it currently exists. So there is a balance. It's a sensitive issue. It's something we battle with on any property that's lower than the road. And we can't stop water from going downhill. We can't pump stormwater reasonably or effectively. So they did implement procedures that I think are conservative and adequate. And again, if the plan were to change where they add retaining walls or move steep slopes, it would change how we look at the drainage system, and we want to make sure it still works if that plan changes. So again, it's take another crack at it if it does. But right now, I think they did a best effort in terms of putting the water where it goes now and making sure it's not more.
Okay, thank you. Anyone? Brian?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the drawings right now, and we're focusing on the buildings to the north and having that 8 to 10 foot level area behind the building so that you can safely put up a fire ladder. But now I look at building 6, and there's a quite steep slope behind that too. It goes from 170 to 160 pretty quickly. So does that mean that for the same reason of having safe access for a fire ladder in the back of those buildings, are we now talking about putting a retaining wall back there so you can have that flat access, or just something that crossed my mind?
Okay.
I'm happy to speak to it. I was going to bring it up as as they were talking about it, but that is the other walkout building where I think they have a 9 or 10 foot drop from front to back. I think the shelf there is a little wider than to the north. And I don't think there's an opportunity to build a retaining wall along that property line, as it's the state's property line or right of way. So that might result in some grading into the soil. So it is something you might want to ask Mr. Ville to address on the record on how they might resolve that with a 9 foot shelf. I believe to the north they've indicated a retaining wall or a change of easement might be possible. But this one here, you'd be filling into the state right of way, which quite frankly might be acceptable to the DOT. We don't know. But I think Mr. Ville might want to answer that one.
Does Mr. Ville want to address that question, or?
No, this is a new request by the commission that we have not had time to prepare for. I'm sorry. We've had 4 meetings so far, and this is the first time I'm hearing about the shelf that we've prescribed being inadequate. So I can't respond to that one at this time.
Okay, so that's a question mark. All righty.
I guess my question is, why would this shelf be any different when it comes to considering our comments?
What? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Mr. Ville.
He was talking to me. Again, for the record, Megan Hope, with Alter and Pearson. So, obviously, if we had gotten that comment earlier, we could have come better prepared with some options. I think if it's going to be a requirement of this commission as a condition of approval that we need to have an 8 to 9 foot shelf around all the buildings so that a ladder from the fire department could get there. That's fine. We would need to show how we can accommodate it. And at this point, Dan can't answer that because we would need to look at options. And I think, could we approach the DOT with an encroachment permit where we could regrade a portion of that area? I mean, that's
Yeah.
possible. Could we shorten the building by whatever amount of feet we need to have that that area? That could be an option. It's speculative at this point. And I think Dan's done a good job considering he found out about that, a couple, I don't know, 30 minutes ago or so. So
I think that representation is not quite accurate because Brandon made these comments months ago. And although the fire marshal did not offer comments that were so detailed until today, the issue has been talked about through our consultant from July at least. It's not new.
Well,
We responded to the initial round of comments by creating a shelf in the first place where there was none. And we talked about, I think, a 4-foot shelf, and after that, the conversation sort of, it didn't come up again in conversation in these public hearings. So we did add the shelf at the request of the commission, and this expansion of the shelf, this is the first time we're getting requests for more shelf.
well, that's the beauty of the public hearing is as we take in more testimony, we get great ideas. And those great ideas only make for better projects, right? And, and we are in a public hearing, so. Actually, I should probably see whether or not the public wants to comment before I go to our other consultants. So, yes. Is there anyone here from the public who wishes? Yes, ma'am, please. Yes, I asked that you use the podium. It's just. And this would be on this project.
Yes, Lori Budney, 242 Weathersfield Road. My question on the snow removal, and they were talking about stockpiling it, but I see from the drawings that it looks like it says it has a concrete curbing. And it looks like there's vegetation, there's trees there, so I'm assuming there's curb and then there's grass and there's a yard. And I'm wondering, how can they stockpile snow if they have to go over curbing?
And you're talking about
As you enter,
as you enter from the complex. So you're talking about that swale that's there.
yeah, on the left,
in
it says
front.
concrete curb, and then on the right also,
Yeah, okay,
and there's trees, and I'm assuming there's got to be curbing all along the driveway.
yeah. Well, because of the swale, we don't want anyone to drive off.
Yeah.
And I think there's are these guardrails as well? Guardrails around as well, yeah.
Trees.
I'm
So
just
the
wondering how
trees-
it's practical to deposit large amounts of snow if you have to deal with curbing and so forth.
And trees and guardrails and stuff. Yes, and I believe that question was raised or comment was raised as well in one of the past hearings, but yes, okay. Anyone else in the public? Anyone online? Okay,
And now that I'm looking at the landscape drawing back to that shelf, it shows a row of trees planted behind building 6, which would prevent access to being able to put up a ladder for safety.
yeah, what kind of trees are those?
I think they're green
Is
giants.
the plans are so big, I'm gonna look on Mr. Rogan's, because otherwise we've got plans all over the place and I can't find anything.
I pulled it up, but I didn't realize I wasn't sharing it.
Oh, no, that's okay.
My screen.
All right. Well, I can't see your screen, so.
I can open them up.
Yeah, no, that's
Take up the
okay.
whole desk, but they.
Well, that's right. That's why I figure we'll just share.
I apologize.
No, you're okay. You're okay. Oh, okay.
LP one.
And I think just while we're looking at the landscape plan, because I do know that we're pretty much out of extension times to extend this public hearing, so we're
Yep.
not gonna get a back and forth between the applicant and the fire marshal, which is typically what we do. So I do think if you're looking at doing a condition of approval, it may make sense to have the applicant sit down with the fire marshal and look at all the buildings. I do think landscaping may need to come into it. I mean, these plants have been on the plan. So I think we would need to talk with him about the landscaping and the particular shelf. I think if you go back to that comment that Maureen had highlighted before, he did use the word may require an 8 to 9 foot shelf.
Okay.
That makes me kind of question, why did he use that specific word? Is it different on the different buildings? So it might make sense when you're crafting that condition that it's not necessarily us guessing what he's trying to say in that comment, but also having a conversation with him on exactly what he needs to provide that access.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the public? Anyone else on the commission? Yes, June. I know.
Everybody's done such a good job today. I would start shaking my head because that was something I was thinking of at the same time. So I think all the comments from the commissioners. One of my thought is in part of our comments from our experts that have been given to us on page 6, it says the impervious coverage of the development has increased. I know we have like rules in Berlin that says how much we need for that. And with that information, I reflect back to Brandon's comments with the discharge points to the north and to the northwest. If impervious coverage has increased, does that change some of the discharge points or the flows coming to those areas?
Good question.
For the record, Danville, I did review this comment. The change to the building at the south edge of the property actually resulted in a reduction in impervious area. The building footprint shrank by about 470 square feet, accounting for the sidewalk. The total reduction in the additional sidewalk, that is, the total reduction in impervious area is 220 square feet, which is less than 1/100th of an acre. So it would not change the values in the zoning table as presented.
Anyone else? I'm gonna go to our other consultant. Len.
Madam Chair, member of the commission, Glenn Chalder from Planometrics. We realize you guys have been inundated with paperwork throughout this process. It became challenging at times for consultants and staff to keep up with this. So as a result, we put together a report, which hopefully you received. This is an attempt, if you will, to try to organize the comments and kind of where we are so that we didn't have individual reports from individual consultants, et cetera. I realize our goal tonight, as Attorney Hope indicated, is to close the hearing, if you will. So this, in a sense, is a laundry list of things to keep in mind as we move forward. There are 7 sections to the report. Just want to summarize them briefly for you. The first was a procedural wetlands question. I think we got a correspondence today that the opinion appears to be there is not a regulated area at the site, so we don't have to wait for a wetlands report to act on 1906. The second major issue is the procedural issue related to the easement. I think the attorneys have indicated that they would accept a condition of approval that those easements be provided, and I think subject to review and approval by the town attorney. So that might factor into your thinking as well. The third element relates to the site plans themselves. I think Attorney Smith indicated earlier that they really had no objection to the comments that were included in Brandon's report. I think the concept of the quality of the fill that's being used, structural fill, is identified in this report. Page 3, item 2A talks about controlled structural fill or compacted granular fill. I think with regard to the issue about snow removal, et cetera, I think the commission could apply a condition of approval related to keeping the travelway open for fire response, using a loader as necessary to clear the snow. As you know, there are times in large apartment complexes where snow gets ahead of their ability to keep up. And as long as we make sure that public safety is protected, there might be a way forward there. Listening to the discussion tonight about the trash provisions, I noticed there's no enclosure around that trash area. So one of the things the commission may want to think about for a condition of approval is for an enclosure with a gate. So if anything does spill over in terms of trash or whatever, it's going to stay in the enclosed area. Item number 4 is the architectural plans. I don't think this has been disclosed to the commission, but just to kind of make it clear for you, 2 buildings in the island when the application came in were 4-unit buildings. Okay, can you bring the site plan up for a sec? Well, I wish I had a green. No, I was just kidding, actually. I think, so the 2 buildings in the middle, there, right where the mouse is going, when the application came in were 4-unit buildings. They were similar to the other buildings in the complex with 1-bedroom units on the ground level and 2-bedroom units on the second and third. You may recall we commented that, hang on a sec, we need handicapped units here. And so as a result, those buildings have changed to 3-unit buildings. A handicapped unit, double width on the first floor, and then 2-bedroom units on the second and third floor. The unit count has stayed at 52 units because building 5, you can scroll over to the, yeah, keep going, there you go. A little more if you could. A unit has been added to the north, or I'm sorry, that would be the west end of that building behind the, or near the trash enclosure. That's a new module. That building, when the application came in, was 7 modules, meaning it had 14 units. Now there's 8 modules and 16. And as a result of that, I find it hard to believe that there's been a reduction in impervious coverage, but we can check that as part of the commission's deliberations on the application. But I think the more important thing I wanted to bring to your attention is the unit mix has changed. And so as a result, I think there needs to be a reevaluation of units, which are how many units do we need to meet the affordability set aside percentage in terms of how many 2-bedrooms and how many 1-bedrooms. So I think that's something we're going to have to take a look at as part of the deliberations. I do think there's an issue with regard to the basements. Again, the building official has identified that the space doesn't meet the building code definition of habitable space. And habitable is a special word in the building code. It means that it's used for living, sleeping, cooking, and other things. But it's potentially usable space. And so it's just difficult to wrap my head around in terms of what this means for the complex. If the commission is concerned about the potential use of the basement, your options are to require a slab on grade for those buildings, reduce the clear height in the basement to, I think it's 6'4" in the building code, then it's not it can't be used for habitable space at all. It's still there, but you can't. So it's just, again, particularly for the affordable units. We created a 1-bedroom affordable unit with a full basement. Does that actually create challenges in terms of the affordability of the unit? So it's not clear how that gets managed, but I think all of this stems from the fact that I think the change in the center units or the center buildings was made in July if I go back through the sequence of drawings, but not disclosed to the commission. So we just recently cottoned on to the fact that the unit mix had changed. And this rolls through a number of elements on the complex. I think the commission has had a good discussion about the grading around the building and the requirement for the ladder access, et cetera. I think Attorney Hope stated it very well. This application is based on these drawings. If there's a change to these drawings, then they're going to have to come back to the commission and explain why this now meets the new criteria or standards in terms of fire access or other provisions. And I agree with Commissioner Dorsey's comment that, well, actually, I think it started with Commissioner Rogan, but the building 6, the eastmost building, is the one that, getting an easement from the state is a lot more challenging. But the ball's in their court, and if they can't make it happen, then there's really no project. They'd have to come back again with a redesign. On page 7 of the report is section 5, dealing with traffic and transportation. The applicants have started their dialogue with DOT in terms of their encroachment and curb cut permit. I think as long as town staff is kept in the loop on this, in terms of those requirements, making sure that the concerns that have been expressed here about traffic volumes, U-turns at Spruce Brook and all the other stuff are considered. It's a state roadway. Section 6 deals with the zoning regulation that was submitted. You may recall as part of the testimony, Attorney Smith indicated that the submission of a regulation was required by the statute, but the commission didn't have to approve a regulation. So the commission, as part of deliberations, will have to decide how it would like to approach this. And I think there's a couple of different options that has been shared with the commission for your consideration. I think the section 7 of the report deals with the affordability plan. Again, because of the change in the unit mix, this ripples throughout the affordability plan in a lot of different ways in terms of the number and type of units that need to be deed restricted. I think no finished schedules have been provided at this time to demonstrate the units are identical. We've had conversations about the affordability term, acceptance of the administrator, income eligibility, and some other provisions in the affordability plan. But I also think it's possible that these could be addressed depending on the commission's considerations through conditions of approval. So that's all I have for you. And again, our hope was that this document would simplify things for the commission moving forward.
Okay. Diane, do you have a question for Mr. Chandler?
I'm glad you mentioned the affordability plan because we haven't really talked about it. And at one point, we touched on it during the public hearing for the text proposal. But the discussion was that it could be considered either with text or site plan. And so I wanted to make sure that it was something we discussed tonight because we've kind of skipped over it to this point. So there were very specific comments that you made early on, and my understanding in my review of the comments that you made in your June 30th report, as we were going along, there were a number of items in the affordability plan that it was my understanding that the applicant was unwilling to make amendments to, specifically with respect to the affordability term, the modification of the 3rd paragraph regarding the affordability period for each affordable unit, the graphic and table being inserted into the affordability plan, identifying unit numbers and the specific units designated as affordable units, I don't believe has been done. And I think from what you're sharing tonight, it has not, or would need to be redone at this point.
Yeah, I think as I testified before the commission before, I think it's really important in this development that we get a handle on what the commission's desire is relative to the designation of affordable units. The applicants submitted housing affordability plan says we'll provide the minimum number on the statute, and if somebody becomes ineligible, then when a lease term is up, the next unit would go to an affordable person. And of course, in that scenario, we end up in a time period that there's not 30% of the units being affordable. So it's sort of like, well, hang on a second, how does that work? And if all the units go online at the same time and everybody becomes ineligible, you could go months or even years before we get back to 30%. So that may not be the commission's preferred direction. Another option, designate the specific units. And if somebody's income makes them ineligible for the unit, then the next available opportunity, they move to a market rate unit at the complex, and the unit goes to a needy person, family, for the affordable unit. And I think a third option is for the commission to say, then provide us an additional unit, additional affordable unit. And now we will always be at 30%, and they can have a little bit more flexibility in terms of how those units are reserved and managed. But again, we're here at the end of the public hearing, right? So the comments have been out there for at least 3 months, maybe 4.
At least June 30th.
Yeah. So I have to say that Brian Miller made a number of amendments based on the initial round of comments. So I thought that was progress made. I do think there are outstanding issues. And I think it's going to come time for the commission to kind of wade through those and decide how you'd like to approach them.
So Mr. Miller is on. I don't know if you want to give him at this point just an opportunity before you move on to comment. Brian, did you want to make any comments?
It looks like Attorney.
Yes, I
Brian.
do.
Yeah, and Brian, this is Meg Hope, for the record, if I can just make a comment before you get started, because I do
Sure.
want to have you go through. We did provide revised plans to the town and the commission. They're dated October 6th. Based on reading this report, I don't think that, I think you guys were writing this before we had these plans perhaps provided to you. So
Plans came in on Tuesday.
on Tuesday, right? So they were printed on Friday. I think they tried to bring them Monday because we're closed, so they came in on Tuesday, which is the same date as this memo. So I think I'm correct that the plans weren't looked at when you were writing the memo, which I understand. I do want to, I guess, point out for the record that there are a number of items in the report that have been addressed in this final plan set that you have. One in particular is the designation of those specific units. So if you do turn to sheet SP1 of the plan set, you're going to see a chart on the right side of your plans. And that is indicating, it's at the top of the chart is called distribution of units. And you're going to see the units broken down by building. And you're going to see columns for 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom with the 60% AMI and the 80% AMI. And you're going to see that there is that even distribution. And then just down a little bit, Maureen, below the zoning table. I did just want to point that out, that we have designated those specific units.
Okay, I'm sorry, because we just found the page that we were supposed to be looking at. Can I ask you to repeat which designated units they are?
So
I'm sorry.
sure. So if you look at the distribution of unit charts,
Okay,
see, so it says distribution of units, and below it, it says, you're seeing the different columns. And then do you see where it says 1 bedroom and then it has a letter A, 2 bedroom B, you see
Yep.
B, B, C, D, E, F.
yes.
Then if you look at the buildings, you're going to see those same letters on a specific unit. And that's how you can tell where the specific unit is
Here.
within each specific building. So for example, if you look at building 2, you're going to see a letter C and a letter B over the units.
There's a B and a C.
That would be a 2 bedroom at a 60% AMI and a 1 bedroom at an 80% AMI, for example. We've shown the chart at the right to show that there's this even distribution, and then we've used those letters to show which particular unit are located within the building.
Building 2.
Mhm.
Before I turn it over to Brian, I guess what I'll say is what Chris told me is that we we will not consent to go beyond that 40-year requirement, which is within the statute.
I'm sorry, you will not?
We will not go beyond the 40-year requirement. He told me that he already said that, but if he didn't, I'm saying it now on the record. We will stick to that provision, and also the applicant and the client will be the administrator of the affordability plan as well. That was, again, something he told me he had already indicated, but I'm happy to repeat that for the record. I think with that, Brian, do you think you could go through section 7 of the staff report and touch on the items that you feel still need to be addressed?
Sure. For the record, Brian Miller, the Miller Planning Group of Wallingford, Connecticut. I took a look at that. We received it, I think, late Tuesday evening, and yesterday I was otherwise occupied, but I did go through it, and to go down the list in the affordability plan, as Glenn acknowledged, we submitted a affordability plan dated August 2nd, which I think addressed a lot of the issues he raised. But on these particular issues, number one, the change in the type of affordable units, we'd be happy to make that change. That's not a problem. Sometimes the site plan got ahead of the affordability plan. The location was just addressed. The finish schedules. I'm not sure if the developer has furnished that, but I do want to just point out that the plan did say that it would be identical to the affordable units would be identical to the market rate units. And the fact that the original proposal to have kind of the floating affordable units sort of ensured that, since the affordable units weren't established at the point of construction. So all units would have been constructed equally. So, I mean, I don't know what the schedules mean exactly. I'll leave that to the contractors, and you know, I have trouble enough working to do things my wife is in the kitchen. I can't comment on that. The affordable term, again, I think that's been addressed many times, that was not going to be increased. And also the acceptance of an administrator on the qualifications. And I think that Attorney Smith has objected to that. The issue of evading these regulations was discussed, and I think the state, you know, we're going along with this 830G. It's a state regulation, and we've been kind of interpreting it as it's over the past 30 some odd years. But the way it's put together is that it expresses this: if it meets these qualifications, including the 40-year term, it qualifies as an 830G. It doesn't say that that it would need to meet any additional qualifications or anything, or any additional requirements. I think that speaks to the 40-year affordability term, but I think it also it talks to this acceptance of administration. We've not changed that. And again, I would ask, what, I believe this isn't the first 830G that's been before this commission. And that these are very general requirements. And why is they pop up all of a sudden, I guess, would be one question. And it may be advisable, but it's not, it's not mandated to be included within the affordability plan. The affordability plan is not supposed to be kind of a de facto regulation. It's supposed to provide a basis for the determination of affordability and include some examples of how that might be done. So I mean, I think that that's, if you wanted, as I've said before, if this commission wants to adopt those regulations as part of your affordable housing regulations, then I would suggest you do that, and then it will not be an issue coming before you unless some attorney decides to challenge it. So this is not required. I think that it doesn't stop the town from requesting any information that they want, and if they don't get it, I mean, even having an administrator, it doesn't guarantee that everything is going to be as you want, as it should be. There are undoubtedly some unscrupulous landlords that don't abide by it. But that would occur no matter what type of regulations, because it's been pointed out to me, and I've known this all along, no town has the personnel or expertise to exactly monitor it. And I don't know how that was put forward. I know years ago we used to, you had Doug, I think, was doing it for years and years. But that's not, most communities don't have that. So, and as far as the income threshold, I'd be happy to include it for the different categories and the different, it's not required, but it's a simple calculation. And it basically, all of it comes off the mean annual family income that's provided by DECD, and we work off of that. And there's a formula, for example, for the 80%, you times it by 80, then you multiply it by 9 if it's a one-bedroom unit, a two-bedroom unit, excuse me, 0.75, it's a one-bedroom unit. But I'll be happy to provide that information and include it. So if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to try to answer it.
I guess I just have one question. I understand it's the minimum, but is there another reason why you refuse to go past the 40 years?
Well, I'll speak for the client at this point, is that the value of the property would be diminished beyond 40 years. And on a personal level, I think 40 years, in 40 years, most apartment developments become more affordable by virtue of their aging. New developments are more valuable, more desirable than older ones. I was on the I think it was the 99-2000 Blue Ribbon Commission, appointed to guide some changes in the statute. And prior to that, if any of you could remember, some of the old timers there I'm sure, is that it used to be 20% of the units reserved for 80% of the income, and it had a 30-year term. And there was other issues that were up for discussion, but that one was the legislature agreed to kind of tighten it up a little bit and do it 40%, and also tighten up the number of uh, of uh, of affordable units that needed to be set aside. So, I mean, it is a diminishment of the value. I'm not sure, I'm not a financial expert, but I suspect it might have some impact on the financing of properties as well. So this is what we've been working with the past 20 years, and for better or worse, it seems to be working. I don't know what the magic of a 40-year number is, but I do understand that no developer wants additional limitations on the use of the property. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but it does come down to the economics and the requirements.
Okay, thank you. June, go ahead.
I was debating whether to mention or not, but you're right. I think as a town, unfortunately, we don't necessarily want certain things dictated to us as we look at what our living conditions are for our community and members. And so when we look at that 40-year period, we may need to extend it in order to complete our requirements as a town for what's being placed on our doorstep for a certain percentage of apartments under that category.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, John.
Not to pitch you against Attorney Smith, but I had asked him a question about the 40 years, maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago, and he seemed to indicate that he thought the statute said it wasn't a minimum, that essentially it's just 40 years. But you seem to indicate that it's actually a minimum and we could impose a condition.
I don't,
No.
if I said that, that's not, I don't think I said that because that's not what it means.
Okay.
I didn't say that either, I don't think. And if I did, then I spoke.
There was discussion about not consenting to above 40 years. That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah.
Oh, I said that, but
Yeah.
Attorney Smith had indicated that you had asked the applicant if he would go past 40 years and he said no.
That's
No,
correct.
Attorney Smith had, I thought, indicated that we couldn't go above 40 years no matter what. I thought that's what he was suggesting a couple of meetings ago.
No,
My
no,
understanding is, oh, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
you cannot, this is being submitted under 830G, which, as
Right.
everybody knows, is a complete different set of rules. And the rules say if the developer provides that the units will be affordable over a 40-year period, then it becomes an 830G and kicks into that. And the town, if you require more, then and the developer refuses to do it, then the developer was likely to appeal that decision, and that the courts would, as I understand it, would tell the town that if the developer says 40 years, it fits the 830G, and we're going to evaluate it on those specific standards. So, I mean, you could say it's 100 years and then it'll be appealed and the courts will come back to you. I think what the whole point of our deliberations, and I think the town has also been, we've been all acting and trying in good faith to kind of have a decision made that by this commission that makes everybody content and avoids that. If we weren't trying to avoid it, and I've been involved in other ones where the attorney goes up, tells the commission, we're going to do this and you better approve it or we're going to court. And I think to the goodwill of Attorney Smith and Mr. Snow, we're trying to meet something that is advantageous to both parties. So if you want to keep in that realm, then I would say you need to stick with the 40 years.
But I was under the assumption it was a 40-year minimum.
It's a minimum as far as the developer is concerned. If the developer wanted to go over, they can. but it's not a minimum as far as what the town can require.
Yes, but it's the developer that's suggesting the 830 development, right? They're the
Right.
one coming into us with affordability. So
Right.
and the state puts a demand on the town for affordability. So shouldn't the town be able to say to the developer, okay, you're taking these bonuses for your under the guise of affordability. Now, the affordability will stay with those units, will stay in perpetuity with that development.
Well,
That-
your
that's
question
my,
is should the your question should, well, I'm not gonna debate should, because
well,
I've
no,
been
but I think you can understand the frustration where the commission comes from, you
I
know?
absolutely do. And I understand that that 830, I don't always agree with it. And I've disagreed with it,
Mhm.
but we're operating with a set of rules here. And I've become familiar with what can be demanded and what can't be demanded. And I've advised clients that, no, you can't do that, because if that's not gonna be upheld in the court, and I would have difficulty saying it's not that certain things aren't a good idea.
Yeah, but I
So,
would
I
think
mean-
it would be hard pressed for a judge to be sitting there hearing an argument that, that some units are gonna revert to market value after 40 years, and
I'll
here they
leave
are
it.
putting the onus on us to get affordable.
So
I just.
Joan, I can only say that that's what what's what the
Yeah,
state says, and
okay.
that's what we're operating under.
Yeah,
If you have,
okay.
you could talk to your attorneys about that, and they may have a different take on it than we've described to
Yeah,
you.
okay.
Or you could talk to your legislators and ask them to change when something comes up. A couple of changes come up every year, and
Yeah.
this
If
is
we're
what's.
framing,
Okay,
if we're
thank you,
framing
Brian.
this as a 40-year minimum, it's simply in the sense that 40 years just makes now 830G applicable, and that's it, it kicks in. And that any extension beyond that would be purely voluntary by the,
Correct.
that's your view of it. I wonder what our town attorney thinks of that.
Well, thank you.
I get your
You
argument, totally
expressed it better
understand,
than
but-
I did, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
but
No, I got you, Brian, I got
I'm
you.
just gonna say this, first of all, I want to comment about the fact that some of this stuff is new stuff, because listen, I was involved in the drafting of your required affordable housing plan. That was adopted by the town council in May of last year. And there were a series of meetings over the course of, I think, at least a year. And drafting that, some of which were joint meetings with planning and zoning. We talked about these issues. We talked about standardizing the affordability plan, and those meetings have gone on in the POCD context. You've been going months, and I've said this in this public hearing, you've been going months talking about revisions to your affordable housing, your many affordable housing regulations that you have in your zoning regulations. And I know for a fact that there are numerous other towns that are discussing putting in requirements that go beyond the 40 years. And that's what I'll say to it. There are numerous, and there are some towns that I believe in, and because I've said this before, I'm a bit of a nerd. I do watch sometimes meetings of other towns because, if there's something of interest, and I've heard, discussion about, again, requiring in perpetuity requirements. So, I don't think that you're the only commission that's debating that. But again, I think part of this is they're saying too, it is not in your regulations currently. So that's something that we talked about with Francisco. And I think that you authorized adding one, I think that may be correct. Yeah.
does the
that's
applicant
in recent
disagree? I'm sorry, does the applicant disagree that we could impose a regulation requiring more than 40 years?
You could, I don't disagree with that. And I know in Glastonbury, they just passed an inclusionary zoning regulation, which is typically the context that towns do it, where they say, if you're going to build apartments, you need to have 10% affordable at the 80% AMI, and they're just putting that in there. So if you're coming in with any development, you need to have that component. I think that the difference here is that we're not coming in under under one of your regulations. We're coming in under the one that Chris drafted for this and under the 830G statute. So I think that's where the difference is.
So I just want to point out that I've brought up and have to move this, of course, brought up on the screen, the statute. And this is the provision in the statute where it says, set aside development means a development in which not less than 30% of the dwellings shall be conveyed by deeds containing covenants or restrictions which shall require that for at least 40 years after initial occupation of the proposed development. All right. It's at least 40 years. And this is section 830G.
Well,
6 of the Connecticut General Statute.
no,
Hopefully microphones are-
Mr. Chandler, let's ask you.
Just a couple of things for the commission. I think you're having a good discussion about the affordability term issue. I think we all know how hard it is to create affordable units. Berlin has made such progress in this regard, but we're now like Sisyphus trying to roll the ball up a hill. And so the question is, what does that language for at least 40 years mean? And I do know towns in the state that have adopted requirements of more than 40 years. So it's something I think that as part of your deliberations can be continued. I think the language which is in here with regard to the administrator is actually very important. I think I testified before to the commission. Know of a municipality in Connecticut where the administrator was the builder's receptionist, did not have the ability to document income in accordance with the federal requirements for this, and really didn't do a good job. And that's what the town found out. The requirement that is in here for your consideration is that the applicant provide the qualifications of the administrator so that they are capable, qualified, and experienced at doing this. It's difficult, I think, as Brian indicated. You need to verify somebody's income meets the criteria so that you know that the household or occupants are eligible. Then you need to confirm the rental rate of the sale price. And if you get green cards for both, you got a deal. If any of those gets botched, the possibility is, particularly on a for sale unit, more so than a rental unit, the affordable unit gets lost. It disappears. And you may notice the small type in the affordability plan that it said, oh, we're sorry, it's a zoning violation. Well, what does that mean? We lost an affordable unit and we can't keep the affordable units. So I think the administrator, I think Brian indicated the message of how it might be done. The affordability plan is the regulation of what has to be done to maintain these affordable units. It's not a wish list. It's not a aspirational document. It needs to be like a regulation. And 40 years from now, if we all got hit by buses, right? Nobody go to England and look the wrong way on the street. The issue becomes one of who is going to administer this. And it really needs to be clear cut and straightforward. And I don't think we're quite there yet. So if a unit's not followed, they disappear. And I think, again, some of the comments in my June 30th report, et cetera. And if Berlin wasn't doing the nth degree before, I'm sorry about that, but two wrongs don't make a right. Let's get it right this time. Let's make sure that affordable units count in the future, meet the statutory criteria. The developer is going to come to the town and say, I don't have to follow your regulations because I've got my 830G. The issue is there are some regulations you do have to follow. And that's ensuring the affordability of the units for at least 40 years. So
Can I just respond to that?
actually, yeah, Brian, just one more thing. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I didn't realize on the new plans that came in, the issue of the specification of the affordable units. I had seen the chart before, which indicated in certain buildings, one of the units would be affordable, but not which unit. And again, I've seen situations in other municipalities where over time, the units got moved around and they were all by the elevator or by the garbage room or other situations. So I think it's important that this be kept track of and any change of the affordable unit location be acceptable to the town planner and to the administrator. 2 green cards again, because I think it's possible that we could have flexibility in the location of the units. But you may recall on 1676, all the units on the Berlin Turnpike are the affordables. That's not equitably distributed in the development.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want that to happen here as well. So I think perhaps some specificity to start could be a possible solution. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Is there anyone else?
Thank you, Glenn. Just,
Oh.
I don't, I'm sorry, if I may.
Go right
I
ahead.
know-
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't disagree with Glenn's expressions of concern about people evading or disobeying the affordable housing regulations. I mean, I know how things work here. We've both been around the block a couple times. What I'm suggesting or what I'm saying is that that is not required to be in an affordability plan. The affordability plan has very specific requirements. This isn't one of them. It's not, and I think when you use the term that follow the regulation, well, that's fine, but this isn't a regulation. You can't just pop up and say things that we'd like to have done. It has to be based on some sort of regulation. Again, I'll reiterate, if this is important, then the town put in a regulation in your affordable housing regulation. And then we'll have to look at that when we come in and do it. You can't just establish a regulation without the process of establishing a regulation and say, we're going to stick it on these 2, even though we really didn't even talk about it or others. So yeah, if you want to do it, do it. I'm just suggesting it's not required in the affordable housing regulation, the affordable housing plan. It meets the requirements. If you want to do this, go do it. But it's not required to be in this plan.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
All right. We haven't even addressed the architecturals on this thing. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sure. No, that's okay. I did, and we can maybe do this now. I thought it might be helpful to go through, Glenn's report. We've kind of been bouncing around all over the place. And I just quickly wanted to touch on a couple of the items that we responded to in the plan set, but that we haven't talked about. So we did obviously talk about the wetlands. Attorney Smith indicated that that report indicating that there are no wetlands on site as part of the record. We have already discussed.
Okay, so when you say about the no wetlands, are you talking about the pink flags that were found underneath the current fill that's there?
I'm talking about the report that was submitted today where your town consultant went out and confirmed that there were no wetlands on the site.
Hasn't this gone? into
It hasn't
public?
gone to wetlands yet
Oh,
because again, their next meeting is not until November, so they have not even seen Mr. Zemba's report as of yet.
okay, so we haven't been through wetlands yet. Okay, all right.
But he did indicate in his report, did they receive a copy of the report?
In your supplemental package that came in this afternoon, so it's
Everything comes in late.
within this. package.
Okay,
So the Wetlands Commission determined that they were going to get a independent party to review the site to determine whether or not there were wetlands on the site.
okay.
Actually, it's not on there, it's on top, it's a separate, because it came in like at
By
5
Land Tech,
Yeah.
the top.
it's- Like this, it was on top of the file.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, I'm going back.
And that's because it wasn't on the list of documents, and that's why I put it on top. because
Land Tech,
It was printed, it came in after the print. So the independent scientists, soil scientists that the Wetlands Agency determined would
yep.
give them a report provided this report today and sent it to us immediately. Our wetlands agent sent it to me. We shared it with the applicant as well, and it distributed to you.
And we haven't had a chance to look at it.
Conclusion. But we want to make sure you had it for the record.
Okay, so we have it for the record, but Wetlands hasn't said anything. Wetlands is still pending. They haven't seen it. Okay,
All right, so
all
that,
right.
that's in the record. The
Okay.
second item in Glenn's report had to do with the easement, which I think we've talked about at length at this point, which is that that would be a condition of approval. And if it doesn't come to fruition, then the project would not move forward. All of the items listed in section 3 about site plans, specifically 1, 2, 3, and 4, those were all part of YRC's memo. So that's redundant, but we've talked about those at length. Number 5, we talked about this a little bit. This had to do with the potential change in impervious coverage. I did just want to circle back to that because I did want to confirm that we did have a decrease in impervious coverage. And I did feel that when Dan said that, there was some puzzlement on the commission's faces. So I did just want him to come up and explain why there was a decrease. Because I think it had to do with one of the widths of the building. So Dan, if you could come up and just explain where that increase in, I think it was 470 square feet came from.
Danville for the record. Maureen, could you share SP1 or really any of the plans that show the buildings? So the building at the south end of the site, in a previous revision, was the same footprint as the building on the east side of the site. So the building has gotten longer and has more units, but it shrunk in its depth. You'll notice that I can't read the building number, sorry.
Building 5. The one all the way. Yeah, building 5.
So building 5 used to look like building 6, which you can see as 6 is on the bottom of the screen. So you can see that it was much deeper. So it's gotten shorter and wider, and the total reduction in the square footage, the footprint of that building is 470 square feet, accounting for the extension of the sidewalk, where I got that total reduction of approximately 220 square feet of impervious area. Right, so while we went larger in one dimension, we went smaller in the other dimension.
Regarding item 6, which had to do with internal turning movements, we did submit as part of this revised plan set that you have that these internal turn movements worked. I would direct you to sheet turn 2 and turn 3. Those are showing that the town's largest fire truck can fit through the site. And then sheet turn 1 is the plan that demonstrates that the school bus can fit through the site. So those were things that are in this plan set. We don't have an issue with 6C about the no parking signs, so that's fine as a condition of approval. Regarding the timber guardrails, that is item 7. Those were added to the plan. You can see those on the west and east sides of those central buildings on the sheet SP1. So that has been added to the plan as well. Dan, regarding the fence on the retaining wall, can you just state for the record how tall that is?
I'd have to refer to the civil.
4 feet.
It's shown as 4.
Okay. So we are showing a 4-foot fence on top of that retaining wall, on the west side. That's item 7B. Car protection, sure. So in front of the the wall, we have a metal guide rail, and then on the top of it, we have a fence. The fence, you can see it on SP1, it has a note.
It doesn't have, I was looking for the detail.
Oh, for the
you're referring
detail.
to. I thought I thought he just said the sheet number and I was just trying to do it.
I think everything in item 8, 9, and 10 were all things from Brandon's memo that we already agreed could be conditions of approval. So now we're at the architectural portion of Glenn's report. So I did want to reiterate for the record that yes, there has been a change in the unit mix or since the beginning. When I believe when Attorney Smith originally filed 26 one-bedrooms, 26 two-bedrooms. We now are at 23 one-bedrooms, 29 two-bedrooms. The total number of units, 52, has remained the same, and the total number of parking spaces, which is 87, has remained the same as well. Regarding the basement configuration, we would agree to a condition of approval that they not be used for sleeping purposes. We did see the comments that the building official made and don't disagree with his comments related to the code and how that space could be used. My understanding is that the concern is that those could potentially be used for additional sleeping purposes, and we would be fine with the condition that says that that use is not permitted in
So,
those basement
if I
areas.
may interrupt quickly, does that mean you're agreeing to a maximum ceiling height of 6'8"? 4?
No, the client's indicating we're not, we wouldn't consent to changing the ceiling height in the basement.
Oh, so, well, go ahead, Brian. Did you want to?
No,
So how are you going to prevent somebody from sleeping down there or subletting that space or whatever?
Sure, so we would have terms within the lease agreement, which is standard, that
Yeah.
can't be sleeping in the basement. Be a building code.
Yeah, because there's no way to get people out of that basement, is there? There's no windows.
There are windows in the basement,
Where?
in the rear elevations.
All right, let me look at, I want to look at these elevations, okay? All right, here's the rear elevation. So are these not the first floor?
The first floor is, no, that's the basement, and the key part here is to look at that green, that's to the right and left of the building.
Okay, so
The
that's,
top of the green would be the
all
green.
right, so there's nothing to prevent people from having that as a living space. Really, why don't you come right down to it? You've now got windows out there in the basement.
Well, we do think residents would be using it,
Yeah,
just they wouldn't be sleeping down there. I mean, in my basement, I have like an art table for my kids and storage, and I think that's what we envision that use being, is like typical basement uses, accessory uses, ancillary uses.
okay, why are there no shutters or something architectural on the rear of the building? You have on the front of the building, you have shutters there. Why in your architecturals do you have just a wall with a lot of windows? A lot of big windows and little windows.
Sure, so I think the design intent there was to be consistent with how houses are typically constructed. You usually always have shutters on the front side of a building. It's more formal.
Yeah, but if you have neighbors to your back, because this is not defined by roads on all sizes or sides or anything, but you have the potential of neighbors in the back or people who have property there now. And there's nothing here that, I mean, it's very flat, stark. It's almost sterile. And on the side of the building, your right elevation scale, you have two little windows there. I'm sure those are hallway windows. I'm not even sure. Are they hallway windows? I mean, I'm just,
Sure, so I'm looking at like the,
I know you're not the architect.
I'm not the
And you're
architect.
just, it's hard to,
It
well-
looks like those are windows in the dining spaces and then the bathrooms.
so you're looking at the back of the buildings, okay? You're looking at the rear elevation.
I was just
side.
mentioning the sides because you had talked about the two.
Yeah, the right elevation that I have, which is the little photo below the rear elevation. This is on page 3. I should just say page 3. Let's go to page 3. So those little windows, what are the purposes of those?
Sure, so if you look at the floor plan, the one towards the lower portion, the bigger one, that's in the dining area of the unit, and the upper one is in the upstairs bathroom. That it's built on the side there.
And your overhang on your roof? What's the overhang for the building? Does it go out a foot? I mean, it looks like it almost ends with the building. There's like a little lip for a roof. And it should probably be a deeper roof than that. You should probably have a good 12, 14 inches, you know, with a soffit running through it, as an overhang.
Sure, I think if you look at the left elevation or one of the side elevations, you can see that the roof does extend. past.
And what page are you on? I'm sorry.
At page 2,
All right, let me go back to page 2 because we're trying to keep
The-
pace with you.
5-unit building.
Yeah, it looks the same. I don't know. All right, concern of mine. Okay. And now this sort of the front door on page 2, your front elevations as far as your front doors go. Do these buildings step out at all, or is it just an optical illusion that you create with the framing on the door?
So they do, hold on a second. I think the best thing to look is at the floor plan.
Ooh, that's right, it's right below it
Does step out.
a little bit.
Face of the building.
All right, questions? Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hog that.
We're going, I'm on page 3,
Okay.
Building. Each building has like 1, 2, 3.
Page 3.
page 3.
Sorry.
So just for clarification, the windows on the bottom are your basement windows.
Correct.
So where's your rear egress gonna be? Those second floor windows?
I'm confused by the question.
So there's no back door,
Correct.
there's no back door in this building.
Correct.
Oh,
So if you ever had a fire, how you getting out of this thing? You're gonna jump out of a window? There's no doors in that back of that building.
Correct. So our buildings do meet the fire code.
Was there a report that our fire marshal passed that?
So to answer that question, I don't believe there is a review of the fire code from the fire marshal. We haven't, typically when that happens is at the time of the building permits. So post approval, we file complete detailed plans and they're reviewed by the building department for compliance with the building code and the fire marshal for compliance with fire code. But they have been designed in accordance with both the state building and fire code.
Could you show us the fire exits, please?
Yeah, so the fire exits are just gonna be the doors.
Front door, right?
Correct, those are the only doors.
So if there's a fire in the back of the building, you kind of have to make your way to the front.
yeah, you gotta find your way
You
to
gotta find your way. Thank you.
downstairs. You have to, if you're upstairs and the fire's in the back, then you have to come downstairs and hopefully you can get out the front door.
There's been some tragedies in the last 10 years that remind me of everyone trying to get to the front.
Yeah.
It's not good,
It's almost a movie theater syndrome, huh?
right?
Yeah, all right.
I'd like to also note for the record that the buildings will be sprinklered.
Well, I think that's a requirement. But that's okay, but that's good. That's good. Anyone else regarding the architecturals? I mean, do we have a landscaping plan?
I might have missed it, but where are the handicap units in this architecturals?
Sure, so the handicap units are in those central buildings, which are the smaller buildings. So buildings 3 and 4, and those would be those.
Asking for the architectural.
Oh, the
Yeah.
architect- Oh, sorry.
This is supposed to be the basement, right? This is the foundation.
Okay. Dan, is that one correct? Is that the one you're looking for?
That's the 2-bedroom accessible. That's buildings 3 and 4.
That's three. Page
With the plan that says,
page 4.
says,
No.
building 3, page 4. Oh, I'm sorry, on this, to the thing. Can't seem to get rid of it. My page 4 does not look like that.
I don't know.
Yeah, probably. There's each building. if
That's
you look
handicap
On the right-hand side of your page, it says what building number it is.
First floor, building 3,
Building 3, okay.
building 3.
is
All right, so
31'2" by 38 foot building 3. First floor.
So
says building 3.
It should be the 8th page in the plan set. How does that help? 8th page in your.
Yeah.
Well, if you count the pages, it's on the top of my screen, it says it's page 8 of 24.
Page 4. Ah,
yeah,
the okay, so what are we looking at now? We're supposed to be looking at the handicap.
yeah, I'm just taking a review. What's that marriage wall that I see? What's that stand for?
Uh-oh.
There's not a wall that cuts directly to the apartment.
There's a perforated marriage wall. Oh, it's a modular building.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, I looked this up as well, so I'll tell you what I learned. These are modular construction proposed, and so during the construction of the module, they put in a temporary wall for the transportation, and then when they build it on site, that wall comes out.
So is this all electric then?
Electric?
I mean, what's your heating source? What's
Heat-
your
it's
heating?
Heat
source?
pumps shows, I think each unit has a heat pump on the back.
So it's electric. So it'll be,
No,
there will be
actually,
no
the heat
gas,
pumps,
no
excuse me, are in
propane, no nothing.
1676, I believe. I'm sorry, I spoke too soon.
No. Yeah. Brian,
Is this all central air then, or?
Yes, central air.
so where's your compressors? Where's all your mechanicals?
For the record, wall mounted heat pumps, so nothing would be on the ground.
So wall mounted on the outside of the building,
And the-
right? All right, do we have plans for that?
Don't have mechanical plans. Those are submitted as part of the building permit plan process.
So I don't know what they look like, right? Okay. All right, so everything's gonna be electric. That's gonna be very expensive. Yes, June.
Please help me. I'm a little lost. Which buildings have 8 foot and which ones have 9 foot ceilings?
Okay,
Because on the
all right.
pictures, on some, they say 9 foot ceilings. And then others say 8 foot ceilings. I don't know if that's an upstairs or downstairs or.
It says.
And just to
custom
address the commission, I
orient-
think Attorney Smith had done this in the beginning. These are conceptual plans.
Yeah,
Every building code, once we do apply for building permits, this gives us the idea of the perimeter of approximately what's gonna happen inside. Some of these questions are detailed questions that, I don't mean to be rude, but we're talking about something that really kind of doesn't meet the your purview here. Yes, I want to make the buildings look good, but it's your opinion perhaps that there should be shutters in the back. It's my opinion that they're not. It's just two people having an opinion.
Well, this is the,
But what's a matter of a code, though, is that we will definitely meet those. These are preliminary conceptual plans that do not meet every building code. If the fire marshal says, hey, we need to add additional type of sprinkler, we'll add additional type of sprinkler.
Mhm.
If for some reason this can't work, and we
Mhm.
don't get a building permit, we couldn't proceed.
Mhm.
So I understand the details and what you're looking for, but some of the stuff is items that will come up at a later.
well, well, I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Snow. However, you have to understand with the commission, we're in a public hearing right now, so we have the opportunity to take testimony from you folks. Once we close the public hearing, then we can't. I can't go to you, I can't discuss things.
Yeah, understood.
So I am putting everything up front. This commission is doing everything it can at this late hour to put everything up front. Because you're already telling us you're not going to extend beyond today. So which that sort of tells me I've got to have a motion to close the public hearing.
It's not that you're not going to, we only have until Monday, I believe. By
Yeah, but
statute. So it's not, if you want, I don't want you to portray that we're being uncooperative.
no, I would never say that. Receiving plans on the 10th of October coming into our office every day, every time we come here, when we think that we have a handle on things, there's new presentations, there's new documents brought in. And so we're doing our due diligence and trying to keep up with the speed and not get lost in the fray. So when we ask you these questions, we've never addressed the architecturals on this site before. We've never had that opportunity. And we have an opportunity now. And we're bringing it to the forefront because I don't want to hear later on, and when we deliberate, whenever that will be, that these items were never brought out in public hearing. So that's the reason why I'm doing it. So I think that you are okay with that.
That's we could make a list and just do that. That's fine. I have no issues with that. It's
Yeah.
just Some of the questions, yes, they're electric, no problem. Do we put shutters on the back or the front? I honestly haven't thought about that as something. In that.
This is why we're
Fine to
all here sharing thoughts.
Yeah, and when we can answer it, we
Yeah.
like can say, not sure.
Exactly. All righty. All right. Thank you.
Well,
All right, go
the
ahead.
reason I was asking with the 8 or 9 foot.
Oh, you're the one who started all
Did
this
you,
trouble.
yeah, I'm sorry for that. Because we've got the backs of the buildings that are very tall from the neighbors. And if they're 9-foot ceilings on some buildings or 8-foot ceilings on other buildings, they're gonna see the differences and it's hard for us to see that on a flat drawing. So now we're having these nice little picture drawings and I'm not technical, so I can't tell you what that is. I'm trying to get a better visual of what they're gonna see on the back or in the community. And it kind of leads into another question I have is, your plans have changed. Like, your, I think planner had mentioned that the buildings have gone to 8 instead of 7. And maybe the length is shorter or longer. I think what we were looking for before is this letter that had to do with the handicapped units. And I'm having trouble understanding if this is the plan, how it fits into like a narrower building or a longer building, because we have a wheelchair accessible in buildings 5, in building 6, in building 3 and 4. And I know it's just a general picture. There aren't lengths, but does that accommodate them same in all of those buildings? If some ceilings are 9 and some ceilings are 8 and some buildings are longer, some buildings are narrower.
First, let's come.
There's no elevator.
You say what's 8 and what's 9?
Well, all the first floors are the 9 and your second floors are.
We've got 9 feet for the first floor and 8 and 8 for the second and third. Regarding the handicap accessible units, my understanding is that the ADA units are those units in building 3, building 4, that those aren't floating units. Is that kind of what you were saying, that you thought the ADA units were floating?
No, not floating. It's just if the buildings were different sizes And this is the floor plan. Does that accommodate the same floor plan in all the buildings?
That floor plan is for the middle units, the ones that you have.
Building 3 and building
Building 3 and building 4 is that plan that you have in your.
Okay, so there's a different floor plan for the wheelchair units in 5 and 6.
And I think a good indication is if you're looking through the floor plans, when you see the bathroom, you'll see the HC designation in there. So then you'll know that you're looking at that accessible unit.
So I'm just, yeah, the wheelchair. And just one more thing, 2 more questions. On the drawing on SP1, it appears there's stairways into all of these buildings to get into the front door. Is that right? It just looks like stairways have been suggested on the drawing.
Yeah, most of them are one step or flat. In the case of the accessible units, you'll see where the sidewalk runs around the side of the units. So in buildings 5 and 6, you've got an accessible unit at the end and a longer sidewalk. So there's obviously no step there. So all the accessible units have no step, and the remainder of units have one or no step.
Okay, so the wheelchair has to go to the side of the building to get in because of maybe a graduated sidewalk. And the ones on building 3 and 4, that's a flat level entry on that. And that's fine. You've got wheelchair parking on opposite ends of that 3 and 4. So one has to travel further. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Right, staff? Ms. Capola, did you want to say something or?
No. You just, I wasn't sure whether you were looking at me because of the time.
I am looking at the time and this is only one item.
We have to close.
Yeah. So is everyone satisfied with the information that you've received as we're in public hearing? Any more questions you have of the experts?
I have a question for.
Yes.
Attorney. This has been going on quite a while. I've missed a couple meetings, although I'm seated tonight. There's the fact that I've missed a couple of these meetings that I didn't review, preclude me from moving to close the public hearing.
I don't think it's appropriate for you to close the public
Okay,
hearing.
then I won't.
Did you indicate that you've reviewed those?
I did not review.
Okay.
So I won't vote on the merits ultimately, but I'm just wondering if that means I'm precluded from, I want to, but I want to ask you first.
Yeah, I
Attempt
wouldn't,
that.
I wouldn't do that.
Okay, then
Thank you.
I suggested that if someone does it, but I won't.
Mr. Chalder, did you have something? You looked like you were about to get up?
Yep. Okay.
I just listening to the conversation here, there's something again, unannounced, if you will, I guess. It turns out that buildings 5 and 6, I think started out being the same, and now building 5 is actually 10 feet shorter than building 6, I think as Dan pointed out. So there's a different unit mix. I think because buildings 5 and 6 each have a handicap unit in them, I think we're okay on the handicap, but just for the record, we're going to have to check with building to make sure that the ADA requirement, because now there's a different type of unit than we had before. Whether that means that we need another handicapped unit, I don't know. We'll figure that out as part of the deliberations and just inform the commission. But when we were confused, like, well, how did the coverage go down if another building module was added? And the issue is the entire building got shrunk by 10 feet. So just for your information.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for noting that. Anyone else really quick? Really quick.
Members.
Yes. Anyone from the public who wishes to address the commission or online regarding this application, now would be the time to do so. And I'm not seeing anyone. No one online? Anyone from the public? All right. Okay.
I will make a motion to close the public hearing.
All right. Motion to close by Ms. Jorsey. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hamel. Further discussion on this? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed, so moved. Okay, thank you. All right, that one's closed. Application of Little Houses LLC prepared by Christopher J. Smith, Esquire, Alter and Pearson LLC, submitted pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 8-30G Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals. Application for the site plan approval of a 20-unit multifamily residential community on real property known as 1676 Berlin Turnpike, map 22-1, block 114, lot 10. And this one is still open as well, correct? Yeah. All right. Okay, hi again.
Hi. Good evening. For the record, my name is Megan Hope. I'm an attorney with Alter and Pearson in Glastonbury. I'm here tonight representing the applicant for the referenced application that was just read for the continued public hearing located at 1676 and 1688 Berlin Turnpike. Again, I'm filling in for attorney Chris Smith tonight. So there are a couple of items that he wanted me to touch on. The first is that our wetland application associated with this project was denied in a 3-3 vote. We are appealing that decision. The complaint has been signed and is en route to the marshal. So we do have a right and intend to finish our presentation so that it is included in the record. We do understand that it can potentially be one of your reasons for denial, but you are still obligated to eventually vote on the merits of our application, our site plan application that is the subject of this public hearing. But I am acknowledging that that has happened. We have confirmed that the town engineer is satisfied with all of the items that were previously outstanding. We have no outstanding issues from the fire marshal or from the police. We have redistributed the affordable units in a way that we selected. We are happy to discuss that matter further with you if you have a better idea on how those units should be distributed. So we took the first shot at redistributing them based on some of the comments from the previous meeting. So I'm happy to go over that. And if you want to provide us with some feedback, that is fine as well. Chris, I know mentioned previously, but we did have a licensed Connecticut arborist and his license number is 61808. Bruce Graver is his name. He did do a site inspection of the trees on October 4th. He indicated in his writing that digging as close as 15 feet to the Norway spruce will not kill or damage the trees. I believe Chris had mentioned previously that if the commission wanted to put a condition of approval that a second arborist provide an opinion or come up with a plan regarding the trees, that the applicant was amenable to that. We did have Scott Hesketh's office prepare a letter. It's dated October 10th, 2023. And I would like to put that into the record. I will have his associate come up and just read that, and then we'll pass that out as well.
Guled Mahmood speaking for the record. This is a letter from Scott Hesketh, PE. I am unable to attend the public hearing on October 12th, 2023 due to a previous engagement. I'd like to state for the record that it is my professional opinion that the site generated traffic associated with the proposed residential development can be readily accommodated on the existing roadway network. It is further my opinion that the traffic volumes associated with this proposed residential development will not result in a detrimental impact to the health or safety of the public, that the site design components and conduct, including traffic associated with the proposal, will not result in an adverse impact to a substantial public interest.
Okay, so I think what's most efficient is to I would like to respond to the staff memo that was put together by Glenn. And I guess I leave it up to the commission. Do you want Glenn to come up and go through his report, or do you want, and then us to respond afterwards? Or do you want us to respond first? I leave that up to you. I guess I'll also note for the record that similar with the other application, these plans were revised on October 6th. The town didn't actually get them till October 10th. So there is some of the items that are in the report that have since been addressed in the plans. So I did just want to point that out for the record. So I leave it up to you. Do you want Glenn to come up first and go through and then we respond, or whatever you think is most efficient?
I think we have a report here, so why don't we hear what you have to say?
Excellent. So I'm going to have Zach come up because we already touched on item 1, which was the wetlands. And I'll have Zach come up and start talking about the site issues that are in section 2.
Thank you.
Good evening at last. Hi, guys. How you doing? I'm Zach Georgiano with Giuliano Associates. You guys hear me? Do I need to grab? I'll grab.
Yeah,
I'll grab tiny mic.
yeah,
Come
do
here.
that so we have it.
Okay. All right. So running through real quick on Glenn's and Marine's and Jennifer's staff report. For the most part, the first section with wetlands has already been addressed. Moving into site plan. First up was a comment on draining issues that Planning Zoning Commission. Neighboring properties have expressed concerns over increase in impervious surface and the impact of stormwater runoff on the properties. Our office submitted a stormwater design, which is compliant with the state and city regulations, addressing the increase in impervious surface by reducing stormwater runoff flows exiting the site in comparison to the previous development for all storms up to the 100-year storm. This design has been reviewed by the town's engineer. No revisions were deemed necessary. And concerns of the neighbors have been explained at several various public meetings, addressing not only how flows are calculated, how the stormwater system flows through, and that we are decreasing stormwater runoff. Next up, there were expressed concerns regarding several issues. Number 2A, the amount of impervious coverage and the lack of green space. Just to confirm what was said last time, I believe I misspoke on the exact percentage, but the total impervious surface is 48% plus or minus. That's saying 48% of buildings, sidewalks, roads is impervious. That means the remaining 62% of the site is green space. The site is within the BT1 zone, which has a maximum building impervious coverage of 80%. So we are significantly less than that maximum allowed in the zone. In addition, going through the town's regulations that they were proposing back and forth about the infill district, it was discussed. The most recent revision I was able to find published was a 50% maximum, and we are below that maximum as well in terms of what we are providing for impervious surface. So we meet both of those, both proposed requirements and the existing requirements for the zone.
Can I ask a question about? that?
Absolutely.
You said impervious surface, you said there's an estimated of 48%, which is building and roads or whatever.
Correct. Building, roads, sidewalk, yes.
Is that assuming that you have 100% use of the acreage?
That is how an impervious surface would be
Okay, so
calculated.
that's also including, so your drainage, your filtration systems or whatever, is that part of the impervious surface, or are they consider that a green space?
They would be considered green space. They are below grade, so it's lawn on top of them.
All right, but you can't put a barbecue pit there
You absolutely could.
on top of the impervious surface there.
It's not
I mean,
impervious
with the
surface, it's green
drainage
space.
Drainage area?
Could you rephrase the question?
All right, you have a drainage area.
Correct.
I mean, I gotta get my bearings now. The north,
West,
west part, yeah.
Yep.
So you have a drainage area there and you have a couple more down on the southern part of the plan. Are they
Correct.
considered part of the green space?
that is correct. They are below grade. So essentially, there's lawn on top of them. They're 6 inches to 8 inches underneath the surface of the earth.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, because you're, okay, I'm just, go ahead.
Maybe Zach, it's, am I correct that stormwater area isn't like a depression or a swale? It's a
No,
flat
it's they're flat surface.